is show a vote of confidence. They should not be going to second-rate schools, not at all. They should not be in communities that don't have wholesome arts and culture and sports programming like middle class and upper class Americans do. The reality for kids in urban America is very different, but the talent is the same. The
Damn.
promise is the same.
Facebook
And the
staff
need
mad at
for the
Zuckerberg
nation.
for leaving
This
up
is what's
trucks leading
important.
to shooting posts.
These are tomorrow's workers, they're tomorrow's
That's
investors,
interesting.
and we've got to invest in them. That's why our Main Street March massive, a massive investment in America's urban communities, particularly in our youth.
Who is this gentleman?
We serve on a board of first-generation investors. Financial literacy and asset ownership and learning early to do things in terms of starting to save, learning what a stock is, learning about mutual funds. And I just want to get a quick.
Yeah, and what's so powerful about that, Joe, is that these young people, college-age young people, created this themselves, and they created it in a way to bring investing skills, financial literacy skills to kids in high schools and in colleges all across the nation. So it demonstrates just another example of how much talent there is, how much initiative there is, and we have to support something like that, which is it's a seedling, is something that needs to be expanded. It's an example, and there are many examples out there like that. But I think we need to see this moment for what it is. It's a moment of challenge, but I also think it's a moment of opportunity for us to understand what we have to do to make America the 21st century America we want it to be. This nation will be 250 years old. What will we say 4 years from now as we look back on these times in terms of what we did to respond as a nation? That's the question on the table. We need boldness, we need imagination, we need to deal with the justice issues, we need to deal with the economic issues.
Ooh.
Hey, Walter, to this point, there has been some bipartisan support in terms of what Congress has put out there, in terms of the funding that's come. But I think the big question is, what now? Now that some of the bipartisanship maybe has been fading away, now that there are different priorities that come out. And Mark mentioned this idea of state and local governments and the layoffs that could come there. I think that's a huge issue. If we're looking at 15% unemployment now, we're hoping to get things back up and running. But there are a lot of economists, most economists, who anticipate that we are still going to be looking at unemployment maybe 9% come December at the end of this year. Watching what happens with the state and local governments, that's where the bipartisanship breaks down, because this has very much been a blue state, red state issue, just depending on who gets affected here. What do you think? What would your call be when it comes to state and local governments? And then secondly, the earned income tax credit that Mark mentioned and that John Hope Bryant mentioned to us earlier today, too.
Let's start with the state and local governments, because they are the backbone in fighting both the coronavirus crisis and, in some ways, trying to keep stability and a sense of community. And I do think you have some bipartisan support for saying we just can't let our state and local governments go completely under in this quadruple storm of everything from economic to virus to police to wealth inequalities happening. And so people like Senator Bill Cassidy from this state have been proposing ways, and he's a Republican, a conservative Republican. He's also a doctor, so he understands when you have an unexpected health issue, the budgets get a little bit out of whack. So I think you could have a bipartisan sense that we have to keep state and local governments afloat. It doesn't mean that you have to subsidize them to do flabby things if you think that's what state and local governments are doing. But if you're in most cities right now, it's not looking like your government is sloughing off. So we need that first. Longer term, we need what both Joe and Mark have said in terms of a pathway to wealth building, so that everybody can say, I've got an equity stake in this community. I've got an equity stake in my country. And what's happened for 20, 30 years is those who've had a pathway to wealth building and built some wealth have been able to ride out a whole bunch of storms. But those who live paycheck by paycheck, those are the wage earners, they're the ones who've got to go to open shops or work behind me on the docks of the Port of New Orleans in places where they can't just use Zoom to get in, or they can't just live off of their savings to ride out a storm. So I think we have to have a more equitable system that leads people, especially African Americans, but people in the middle class, have a pathway to a secure ability to have wealth that will take them through the many storms we're going to go through in the next 10 years.
Yeah, and I'd
Walter,
like to
Mark,
just...
want to thank you. Oh,
yeah.
Mark, go ahead.
I was going to just share that I think you may want to look at the comparison of where we were in 2000 to where we were in 2020 when it comes to things like home ownership for all Americans and for Americans of color. What people's real income looks like in 2020 versus 2000. What I've been struck is how much ground we've indeed lost on those very simple measures. And that is what people are saying. When a large percentage of Americans who rent homes in this country pay 50% of their income to keep a roof over their head, then the American dream is amiss.
Wow.
Gentlemen, excellent points. We really appreciate your time this morning and your thoughts on this.
Always good to be with Walter.
Always good to be with you, Mark. Hey, Mark, stay on for a second. I need to talk to you right away about all this.
All right, Joe, I'll send it over to you.
All right, thank you. Coming up, Dr. Scott Gottlieb is going to join us. We're going to ask him if protests in major cities are going to lead to a spike in COVID cases. Before we head to break, let's get a check on the markets. Squawk Box coming right back.
Dang, are we gonna fucking attach this thing this time?
Drug maker Eli Lilly has launched the first study of a new type of COVID-19 treatment. In this case, Meg Terrell joins us now on the newsline with the details. Hi, Meg.
Well, good morning, Joe. This is the first drug to enter human clinical trials that's specifically designed to fight COVID-19. It's what's known as an antibody drug, and Eli Lilly, along with its partner Accelera and the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, actually isolated this antibody from the blood sample of one of the first patients in the United States to recover from COVID-19.
How do I do the
This is an
y'all?
antibody that specifically targets those spike
Which one
proteins
does
on
that?
SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19. They're going to be testing this, and they've already dosed the first patients in hospitalized patients with COVID-19. They expect the results by the end of June. This is really a safety and tolerability study, and if that goes well, they will move into a larger phase 2 trial in non-hospitalized COVID-19 patients. This is also an approach where they think it could be potentially preventive, so trying to protect vulnerable patients from getting infected with COVID-19. This is the first of a few different approaches like this. Regeneron is also working on one, expected to start human trials this month as well. And this is about a month ahead of when we expected Lilly to get into human clinical trials, so it's moving very quickly. And Lilly says that it's already starting to scale up manufacturing to have potentially several 100,000 doses by the end of the year if these trials go well. So a real milestone this morning.
What changes y'all?
Specifically designed to fight COVID-19 entering human clinical trials, guys.
Great. All right. Thank you, Meg. That is every day. We're working hard, and hopefully something bears fruit in the near future.
Our fingers are crossed for everybody. Meantime, following these violent protests around the country, could there be an uptick in COVID-19 cases? That's the question this morning, and joining us to discuss the answers, Dr. Gottlieb. He's also CNBC contributor, serves on the board of Illumina and Pfizer. Good morning to you, Doctor. You know, we watched these protests taking place and the unrest all across the country. Some people were masked, some people weren't. What's your state of concern at this moment?
Well, look, I think there's going to be a lot of challenges coming out of the events of the past week. One of them is going to be that probably chains of transmission will have gotten lit by the large gatherings. I don't think that there's really a question about that. Minnesota in particular was experiencing a large outbreak of its own. They really didn't have full control of the epidemic. It was expanding. Hospitalizations were going up.
We got it. The Poppy, what are you doing? The Papa
so that's
J,
going to
what's
be another
good?
challenge coming out of these events.
You know, the mayor of Atlanta suggested that anybody who was involved with any of the protests or were out on the streets should go get tested this week. What would you recommend across the country take place?
Can we do this?
Should everybody go
Are
get
we gonna
tested?
dock this bitch?
Well, look, it's unclear what the prevalence is in these different areas and who is in those crowds. I think your risk has to do with what the prevalence is in the community.
I think I'm going down today. I think it might go down today too. Shit's crazy out there. Depends on what you're gonna get though. This ADMA is fucking cruising up right now.
I don't know particularly about Atlanta.
Look at me, I'm fucking docking a spaceship at fucking 7:30 in the morning. Like what?
A lot of people who are in these crowds are young people who probably weren't heeding a lot of the warnings anyway about social distancing. But these certainly brought together big groups of people and increased the risk that you're going to see some transmission coming out of these events. Again, there's a lot of difficult issues coming out of these events.
Bro,
this is just
we are
one of them.
docked.
But I think you're going to see some chains of transmission that will have gotten lit from these large gatherings, from these protests.
Well, let me ask you about that, only because we talked about being outdoors so often, and also about warmer weather and whether that has any impact on this. Is there any chance that we dodge this in some way?
Well, the question is, dodge what? I mean, I'm not going to sit here and imply that we're
What
going
just
to have
happened?
major epidemics growing out of these protests. I think we're going to have some cases that get started as a result of the social interactions from these protests. These aren't, normal, typical social interactions. These are a lot of people grouped together in crowds where they're not, taking good precautions. A lot of people were wearing masks. They were taking them off if you watch the photos. So it's a higher risk environment. This isn't a day at the beach or, going out to a picnic where you're outside and you might be in larger groups, but there's some social distancing and you're able to take precautions in these kinds of gatherings, these kinds of crowds.
This is the simulator for docking the spaceship.
You're not going to be able to take those kinds of precautions. So it is a risk. There's no question that it's one of the risks coming out.
It's like a simulator for the
past week.
SpaceX Dragon.
Doctor, one of the points though that Mark and Walter made in the last segment is that this is going to disproportionately impact those that are lower income, may have a lower capacity or ability to get health care. I'm just trying to think through some of the permutations, especially this week, in terms of trying to get people help in advance to the extent they can. Also, lots of these young people may be living with people who are older.
Was I going too fast? I think I was docking too fast. I should have slowed down.
Very heavily disproportionately impacted people from lower economic groups and also Black Americans and Hispanic Americans. If you just look at the data, about 1 in 5 counties based on U.S. Census data are disproportionately Black counties. It accounts for about 35% of the U.S. population. Yet those counties account for 50% of the COVID illness in this country and 58% of COVID deaths. So this disease has disproportionately affected those communities for a host of reasons. You know, and the fact that the protests took part in large measure in the same communities, I think is going to exacerbate the strains on these communities. You saw businesses destroyed and, you know, stores shut, and so that's going to exacerbate strains on communities that are already
goal for today? I don't know. Just watch everything right now. I mean, everything I have is doing really well. I'm just going to watch everything. If shit hits the fan, I might liquidate.
And we thank you again for your insights, as we do every single morning, and we hope to see you again tomorrow. Thanks. Becky?
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Andrew. When we come back, Bob Johnson, the founder of RLJ Companies and BET, is our guest. That's right after
I'm just really chilling today. I'm going to watch everything. I mean, this was a wild-ass weekend.
Futures this morning,
we're fucking shooting rockets into space, and we're also riding and looting.
70 points right now. S&P up by 3 points. The NASDAQ down by 7. This comes after 2 weeks where all 3 of the major averages ended higher. Squawk Box will be back after a quick break.
I think Tesla's gonna get big this morning. It might. It absolutely might. That shit was wild. 2 dudes, International Space Station. Like, what? Let me go this way? No. Let me go this way. I mean, how am I not epically lined up for this motherfucker? Elon is laughing at me? You think so? You think he's like, dude, you fucking sucker. Playing my fucking video game. Playing my video game, that's all we made at SpaceX was this dumbass video game. I found a cool site for free TV, a place called Pluto TV. Months for Twans, what's good, brother? We're gonna fucking dock this bitch. Going to tweet again that it's too high again. It's gonna tweet again that it's too high. Oh, Elon, that'd be hilarious.
Yeah.
A number of high-profile CEOs speaking out on issues of inequality and civil unrest. Apple CEO Tim Cook sending a memo to employees in which he addressed the killing of George Floyd and nationwide protests. He wrote, in part, I have heard from so many of you that you feel afraid in your communities, afraid in your daily lives, and most cruelly of all, afraid in your own skin. We can have no society worth celebrating unless we can guarantee freedom from fear for every person who gives this country their love, labor, and life. Among other actions, Cook says that Apple is making donations to a number of groups,
within point 2,
the Equal
I mean
Justice
0.0,
Initiative,
0.0, 0.1.
The social media giant CEO Mark Zuckerberg
Range.
pledged $10 million
How do we get
to
X, Y,
groups
and
fighting
Z?
racial inequality. He writes, in his words, the pain of the last week reminds us how far our country has to go to give every person the freedom to live with peace, or with dignity and peace. It reminds us yet again that that violence that black people in America live with today is part of a long history of racism and injustice. We all have the responsibility to create change. And BlackRock CEO Larry Fink sending an email to employees and posting the message on LinkedIn.
Keep your rate below point
It reads,
2.
in part, these events are symptoms of a deep and long-standing problem in our society, and it must be addressed on both a personal and systemic level.
I mean, we're
This
just
situation
chilling
also
here.
underscores the critical importance of diversity and inclusion within BlackRock and society at large. We will continue to push forward in our efforts as a leadership team to build a more inclusive and diverse firm. All right, joining us now with his thoughts on how business leaders at this point can, I'll see my friend Robert Johnson, founder of BET, founder of a lot of different
Founder of BET,
organizations,
damn.
and a frequent guest and someone that we talk to all the time. Robert Johnson, thank you for joining us this morning, and just your thoughts about where we stand as a nation after the recent events, sir.
Well, I'm delighted to be with you guys this morning. And to my thoughts, just before I got on the Zoom feed, I happened to go back and look at a clip on the Kerner Commission report, which was released in 1968 after the horrible riots throughout the country and Detroit, particularly
0.0.
and other major cities.
I mean, this is fucking dead. We are dead on right now. We're going slow enough.
And the Kerner
What more do you
Commission
need from
report
me?
concluded after studying it that the words that became famous for it is that we are moving towards two societies, black and white, separate and unequal. And I think that's what is before us today because of the killing of George Floyd. But more than that is sort of the pent-up anger, frustration, and bitterness that expressed by many African Americans who are out in the street protesting. And therefore, I have decided that it's time for this country to face up to the critical question that has plagued this nation since its founding, and that is the need for full and complete reparations to African American descendants of slaves who are still today living in a chasm of wealth and income inequality, which in my opinion, and it was echoed in the Kerner Commission report, they called it poverty. I call it inequality of wealth and income, that is driving this nation back towards two societies separate and unequal. And unless
I don't know about all that.
I
don't know about all
on
that.
that issue, I think this country, as we saw with the Kerner Commission report and the riots in '68, now it's 2020, we will see this happen time and time again. So my request to the CEOs, and I'm sure they will understand this, now is the time to go big. Short answers to long, horrific questions about the stain of slavery are not going to solve the inequality problem. We need to focus on wealth creation and wealth generation. And to do that, we must bring the descendants of slaves into equality with this nation. And that's what I proposed in this $14 trillion proposal to
Can we fucking land this
provide
thing?
reparations, not only for the sin or the atonement of the sin of slavery and Jim Crowism and desegregation, both de facto and de jure, but to cause America to live up to the concept and the notion that this nation was born on the idea of American exceptionalism. And if we take that big leap, I am convinced that the problems that we confront today can be solved. But
so the slower you go, the closer you go, the easier it is.
And $14 trillion in reparation for damages visited upon the
14 trillion, dude? Dude,
is
bro.
an appropriate statement.
Bob, how would
I don't think that's the way we go about it. Why can't we focus on education and people have to save and shit?
A radical idea, and
what about a UBI?
And I've seen it put forward before, and not taken to all the way to mainstream thinking. And I think that you're embracing it is probably going to get a lot of people talking about this. Where would the 14 trillion come from? I mean, lately we've been thinking we can do 3 trillion here, 3 trillion there. This would be through some type of wealth transfer from the haves to from people that have the money, the wealthy individuals. Where would that 14 trillion come from?
Well, let me just say, on the contrary, I put out this statement it's on my website, been on my website since 2019 about the need for this reparation. So I'm not new to this challenge. But to the point you're making is that wealth transfer is exactly what's needed. Think about this. For 200 plus years or so of slavery, labor taken with no compensation is a wealth transfer. Denial of access to education, which is a primary driver to...
Can I get wealth transferred? Seriously. I feel like it's driving more racism. We need a universal basic income for all. We need to stop asking for like a certain race to get something. Like it's the same thing on the other end. UBI for all. UBI for all. It's not a race thing. There's fucking poor, enslaved white people, Asian people, fucking African American people. There's fucking Native Americans. Like, what are we doing here?
They live in apartments.
What are we doing?
And where there
what about Mexicans and Guatemalans and Hispanics and people from fucking South America? Like, why are we fucking forgetting all the other people?
That's why today,
like, that's not the fucking argument. That's the dumbest fucking argument.
40% of home ownership. White Americans are 70+%.
So fucking stupid, man.
When you put all of these factors together, lack of access to education,
Amberly, awesome. Thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate that.
Middle-income Americans, and discrimination.
Slavery was always illegal in the U.S. It was them damn Brits that had the slaves.
In effect, a wealth transfer from white Americans away from African Americans.
People that lived here and families definitely had slaves. I get it, but like
the CEO Tim is
at the same time, dude, like you've had lots of opportunity, and I get we need to focus on fucking education and the wealth gap and shit. Schools are awful. People of poverty need a better chance at college and stuff like that, and education so that they can better themselves. But free handouts is just not really the way. Like, what are we gonna do? Give everybody a house? Then what?
To link up with the space station. Big, bold ideas like that
just doesn't make sense to me.
Become the order of the day. So to my fellow CEOs, gentlemen, ladies, it's time we go big. And we have the institutional knowledge, the financial experience to craft a way to get this money in the form of cash. I'm not talking about programs, more infrastructure.
Why does our generation have to pay for the mistakes of our fathers? I have no idea.
More,
yeah, like I did not benefit shit off that.
Deliver and don't perform. I'm talking about cash. We are a society.
Cash. I'm talking. We should give cash to people. Then what are they going to do with it though? What if they're not educated to use it correctly?
Allow African Americans to
doesn't matter if it gets fucking just blown.
Damages. And damages is a
dude, it's education, not money. It's fucking education, not money. This is so fucking stupid. They can afford an education with it.
Right, property right.
Okay, but if they don't know any better, are they going to go get an education, send their kids to a private school?
And the final thing, let me say this. If you think about it,
oh my God. Why can't we just make public schools better? Why can't we make public schools better?
Which means we spend a major portion of our wealth. One of the reasons why we have less savings. But the point I'm trying to make,
I'm just saying a one-time payment to somebody, reparations, Jackleberry. You're not getting it. You're not getting it. I just said UBI is the way.
Consumers.
You're not.
That money is going
to really getting it.
Back
whatever.
To the economy. Yes, there will be more black businesses, I'm sure, because they will invest. But the bulk of the businesses and services and consumer
I'm saying reparations is fucking stupid. It's a dumb idea.
This money will return to the economy very fast. So this is not a complex idea if you really think about it. It's really, as I said, it's a little bit of atonement, but more importantly, it is
educating the masses leads to difficulties. Yeah, they lead their authority. They lose their authority and leadership over you when you realize you don't need this authority.
The longer-term dynamic about both social justice in this country, about where the African community stands, both within the economy and within the business community. You know, I appreciate the idea of giving out cash. I wonder whether there's cash plus, because I think if you're trying to create long-term change, you might want to create more infrastructure or more big plans that may have
like handing out cash doesn't do anything.
I think something like this would.
Well, let me tell you what I call philosophical and social change that would take place. Once white America embraces the notion that to rid this country of its original sin, which is slavery.
Oh my God.
And to signal to African Americans, many of those same individuals who are out in the streets throughout this nation today, that we respect the fact that we owe you compensation.
But I don't,
we owe you something that was denied to your ancestors for over 200 plus years.
What about Native Americans then? What about Mexicans? What about Guatemala? Why is it just reparations for one group for one thing? What about the fucking Alamo? What about the Native Americans we marched across the plains and killed all them? This doesn't make any fucking sense. I didn't do it. Our government needs to pay for it now? What the fuck? This is so stupid. Why don't we work on educating everybody and of freeing everybody and education? This is so fucking dumb.
And their commitment to the country, as they've done in fighting our wars, they will do it in terms of their commitment to raise their children.
And didn't the people that started businesses and fought wars, weren't those people compensated and shit? Are there not African American business people at all? Are there none? I mean, I just invested in my best friend who's fucking African American, who's the CEO of a brewery we started. Like, so what the fuck? He just raised $1 million fucking for a real business.
More stabilization in the communities because they have
like, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Capital to invest. So when people say that this is a complex problem, because how do you get it to African Americans? Well, we get information to African Americans. We ask African Americans to fill out a census form saying what your race is. We have African Americans
Did we get it?
Develop affirmative action programs and the like. I'm saying this is the affirmative action program of all time.
That's true.
In the sense that it takes away from other people deciding what
the fucking dock a space
really
station
want to do
to
rebuild, restore, and grow their economic wealth by themselves, rather than have 17 agencies out of 17.
They're like, yep, we need to move the fuck on
now. We were having a conversation earlier about the lack of ownership, and that's the most important thing that's missing. And we're talking half measures of financial literacy, and I see. You kind of just refer to it as all these bureaucratic programs that never really get in it, and it just would take forever. This would do it in one fell swoop.
We could
appreciate
play another anniversary million.
We're out of time. I want to have you back.
And I'm sorry and this would lead into the days.
In 2019, but this is radical and certainly something very thought-provoking, Robert.
Thanks for the time, but I assure you, putting money in the hands of the consumer, which we're doing right now today, is not radical.
Okay.
It is what Americans do to grow our economy.
All right. Thank you very much, Robert. Robert Johnson. Andrew.
Okay. Thanks. We got a lot more on Squawk Box ahead, including Ken Frazier, the CEO of Merck and more. We're back in just a moment.
Should I take a shot at this? Maybe I just try and spin it. We're trying to spin to get into the last 109 million for today. Don't talk in caps what's good. I'm fucking registering this bitch. I want to take out Senor Plantano. It's going down. It's going down. We're dropping 109. We're playing hard today. We're going for $1 million today. We're playing day 1 today and day 2 today. We're going all the way till fucking midnight. 3 in the morning the stream's going to be live. And we're going to take down 150 motherfucking K today. You understand? You understand? Hey, you understand? Spy's tanking, isn't it? No, it's not. Wow, ADMA is just tanking. What is that about? ADMA is like, yo, let us get some daily volume going. Jesus.
A new poll conducted for Squawk Box by SurveyMonkey shows a rapidly increasing racism against black people is a major problem in the United States and a growing perception that white people benefit from unfair advantages. This all while a majority of unemployed Americans do not think that their financial situation is going to improve in the next year. Joining us now, SurveyMonkey CEO Xander Lurie, and also back with us, John Hope Bryant, founder of Operation Hope. Good to see you again, John, and Xander, welcome.
Thank you.
Can you fill in, just give us more color on this entire finding from the survey, please, Xander, and then we'll have John respond as well.
Sure, Joe. Thanks for having me back. We have interviewed over 1 million Americans since the coronavirus outbreak started, dating back now almost 3 months, including 100,000 Black Americans. And the findings have been quite interesting.
It's unfortunate you're south of the border. You would have made a solid Canadian.
Has moved from not only a health crisis where 60%.
Okay, but I want 0.00001% for viewing hour surcharge.
The health crisis. And what's most
all months retarded. That is a fucking great comment.
The disparity there is between how Black Americans are viewing this crisis. Over 70% have critical feelings about economic wellness. 30% more than white Americans, feeling not only that the health crisis is more likely to affect their community, their family, but the economic crisis will have a toll that they can't recover from. Over 70% of Black Americans feel that discrimination is the biggest problem in America, more than partisanship. And you're seeing a huge disparity of how whites and blacks are viewing the coronavirus, the health epidemic, and the economic crisis and fallout.
John, I would never, my daughter, but she has told me, just don't even pretend you can talk to any of these issues because you can't. And so I'm not going to pretend that I really can know what it's like. But I think everyone, John, realized without video how many of these things are happening that we only see when it's on video. And
keeping it real here.
I think that
what is that? Is that a link? You got to DM me a link.
These recent situations where if it wasn't on tape, it's like we'd never know about it. So how many times do we not know about it, John? And that's why all the fury and the anger and the But like I said, I'm not supposed to talk about this. But that's what struck me, John. Do you think that occurred to anyone else? That this is happening all the time?
I think it was Will Smith that recently said that racism is not new, it's just been filmed. And I think, by the way, it's fantastic that you and your daughter can
racism's not new, it's just filmed. That makes sense. That does make a lot of sense, dude. I was saying that yesterday with my brother. It's crazy that you see all this shit. Like, everybody's down there with the cell phone and the camera right now. And you see this shit fucking going down now, you know?
That growth I saw in Xander's data.
Before you didn't see it real deal unless your ass went down there too, you know?
Racism is an issue. And maybe it's because, Joe, because they're seeing the undeniable truths of these videos that are unmistakable and unexplainable. And that gives me hope. It gives me hope even from our last segment.
No link, fat fingers up in here at the period of the Zaysky. I do that all the fucking time. I do that shit all the time.
Xander's good data with Operation Hope's data that shows that where George Floyd was murdered, the average credit score is about, I'm looking at my data now, 570. The average credit for blacks, the average credit score for whites in the same area is 728 in the same state. The average income wealth for a black business is 79,000. The average wealth for a white business is 590,000. These are huge gaps that go back to your last guest, Bob Johnson's comment. He talked about a topic uncomfortable for many, which is reparations. But let me reframe it. And I put this in my new book. I try to frame this in a way that doesn't make people defensive. If you look at slavery as just simply the reverse transfer of wealth, that if you work hard, play by the rules, you get the benefit of your labor. But if somebody else was working hard and you got the benefit of their labor, I think everybody sees that as fundamentally wrong. I think you can sort of just look at it that way.
Absolutely.
You got folks working hard, who are very industrious, black folks, for 300 years, but somebody else's house got bigger. Somebody else got the tractor. Somebody else got the mansion. Somebody else got the wealth creation.
Got it.
And that is the gap. And then you couldn't get education. You couldn't get you couldn't uplift yourself if you wanted to until really after Dr. King's death. And there is your gap. There is your snapshot. Now to see
that makes sense.
That come together and using social media for something positive like social justice is a beautiful thing. The question is, to quote Dr. King's last book,
look at this dude's fucking monitors over here. This dude lays back and
so Xander,
is chilling.
Let me ask you this: there's obviously a huge debate in Silicon Valley.
Put a name on it, not a color.
Media, and here we are talking about, to some degree, the benefits that social media has created by exposing these issues in ways that really probably couldn't have even existed.
Can't we just invest in schooling in all humans? Like, why can't we invest in the education and feeding of all humans and animals?
How do you weigh
except for the ones we gotta eat. You know what I mean? But you gotta feed them too before you eat them. So.
Well, I think the social media.
You know what I'm saying? Circle of life. Hakuna Matata, motherfucker. Let's go.
Events we're discussing. We're seeing Democrats largely in favor of initiatives that keep people safe and welcome online.
I'm of the Lion King generation, all right, Chad?
Freedom of speech online. So you're seeing
I grew up with the Hakuna Matata, all right?
Different policies here. I mean, I think the truth is anybody waiting around for the federal government or Republicans and Democrats in Congress to solve these issues is going to be waiting for a long time. Companies are going to have to step up and navigate this tricky landscape in how we serve our employees, how we serve our customers. We're launching a new return to work template today for companies, organizational leaders of any size, in nonprofit, education, large businesses.
Can we just agree to focus at home, not spend money overseas, not manufacture overseas, educate the people at home, make things at home, you know what I mean? Take care of the humans at home.
But social media,
instead of selling out our fucking economy to the
discrimination
to a foreign country and creating such a wider wealth gap in this country. Like, why can't we talk about that?
We've got a lot to discuss in terms of policies, and we know that the diversity, equality, inclusion practices.
What a wonderful phrase! Ain't no passing grade.
Andrew and John, thank you. Andrew.
It's just so weird to me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. Coming up a lot more this morning on this
Like, and what's the excuse for the people that have made it?
Going to join us for a special interview, and then
you know what I mean? Like, are we cutting down anybody who's been winners? You know?
Melody Hobson, and later Allianz Chief Economic Advisor Mohamed Al-Arian on the market impact, and also a preview of this week's big jobs report. So much coming up on a very big hour of Squawk Box straight ahead.
The whole world's wild. I don't know what's going on anymore. I'm fucking lost. Bank of America up. Delta's gonna be up. I know that. I know that somehow my stock account is gonna be fucking up. And why? I don't really fucking know, dude. I don't know. I haven't even figured it out myself. I'm making the money. I'm somehow making the right choices. But I don't fucking understand it. I was joking yesterday like I was gonna come in this morning and liquidate everything to cash for a fucking huge drop. But who knows? Bartown, what's good? I've been lost for years. I just don't understand this. Like, what is happening in the world? Casinos too. Casinos are going up. DraftKings racing to the fucking moon right now. DraftKings and Penn National Gaming to the moon. Delta Airlines, fuck yeah, no planes are flying. Every city is fucking burning to the ground right now. Delta Airlines has got you. And you know what? If you feel like you can't get ahead of the game, instead of saving your money, you might as well take it to a Hollywood casino. Or fucking throw it online since we're all on quarantine and play it on DraftKings, right? That's what we're fucking saying here. Damn, but I know I got me another nice score Saturday night. Got a second in the 668K for 822. Bartown. Taking it down. Let's fucking go, brother. That's some good shit right there. That's some good motherfucking shit right there.
Good morning. Crisis in America. Protests
you ever play $109 million
violent in some areas
without delay?
As demonstrators angry over the death of George Floyd take to the streets.
You ever do
Tackling
that shit?
the systemic issues beneath the unrest, racism, income inequality, and a global pandemic that could make the economic divide even worse. Coming up, we've got 4 interviews for you on how America can begin to address these problems and build an economy that works for everyone. Merck CEO Ken Frazier, Robinhood CEO Wes Moore, Ariel Investments co-CEO Melody Hobson, and Allianz Chief Economic Advisor Mohamed Al-Arian. The final hour of Squawk Box begins right now.
King Jack on the flop here.
Good morning and welcome to Squawk Box here on CNBC. I'm Joe Kernan along with Becky Quick and Andrew Ross Sorkin. And U.S. equity futures are now up a little bit. They're up about 53 points in the morning session. Maybe somewhat surprising.
Good start to the million. Let's go.
The events of the weekend. The Nasdaq is lower, down about 14, and the S&P is indicated up a little bit less than a point. It's the first day of June. So we'll see how the summer plays out. A lot of times in the past, you'd see maybe a little bit less volume, a little bit less activity. I have no idea what
it's 8 in the morning. This is crazy.
Does
9
at this point,
10,
Andrew, because it's 2020
11, 12,
is going to be the year that I guess hopefully someday we look back on it and say, wow.
Really helped me in the BR challenge I have going with T-Law. Yeah, I was seeing that. That's fucking awesome, guys. I actually like that. That's some good content. Hope, but, is this one not for this week? Like, I don't understand.
I want to talk to one of
am I supposed to make it into day 2 today?
Right now about this very issue that we've been seeing over the past couple of days. CEO of the biggest companies, as you know, in America have spoken out on the tragic death of George Floyd and the protests over the weekend. Names like Apple, Facebook, and many others. We want to welcome, though.
Is that what's supposed to happen here? Like, I'm confused.
That conversation on corporate leaders looking for solutions to all of this. Ken Frazier is joining us, Chairman and CEO of Merck. Ken,
how did somebody already get dumped to here in fucking 2 hands?
You have been outspoken on a lot of these issues over the past several years, but we have not seen something like this in quite some time. And as a leader, as a CEO, as a father, wanted to just get your thoughts to begin on what you're seeing and what you're telling both your employees and your family.
So first of all, Andrew, thanks for having me on this morning. I was on this network less than a week ago talking about what our company is doing to help with the crisis created by the pandemic in terms of vaccine research and antiviral research. And here we are a few days later facing another crisis of a quite different dimension inside our company. The first crisis, I think we can say, caught us by surprise with the virus that emanated from China. This crisis has been brewing for hundreds of years, and we're going to have to really step up to it. So to answer your question, I would say, first of all, there's a huge amount of
shit's going down. I like this. I kind of like the pushback. Like, this has been brewing for hundreds of years. Let's fucking, government's got to go.
What the source of some of that anger is. And I'll start by saying, when you
militarize police, we need to demilitarize
we've
police.
We've all seen it over and over again. What that videotape shows is a police officer, a 19-year veteran of the police force in Minneapolis, along with 3 other of his colleagues, with a person who's handcuffed and on the ground being held down by 3 officers. The officer has his knee on this person's neck. If you look at that officer's face, you see no expression. You can tell this man is not a threat at all because the officer who has his knee on his neck actually has his hands in his pockets. You have a person saying, you know, I can't breathe, I'm dying. Eventually, in complete fear, he cries out for his mother. He says, "Mama." There's a crowd around saying, "Take your knee off his neck." One officer's just holding the crowd back. So what the African American community sees in that videotape is that this African American man, who could be me or any other African American man, is being treated as less than human. And I think what really caused the spark that set all this off
it's fucking
is
true.
What is the reaction of the officials to what I just said? So you now have this videotape, and for 4 days, there's no action. No one thinks that this is worthy of even putting the officer under arrest, which is the threshold step in our criminal justice system. It isn't an indictment. It isn't a criminal trial. It's not a conviction. You can do all the investigation. You could do the autopsy. But what the community saw was until they went out into the streets, this officer
was about to be overlooked.
Going to be much less
Fuck
the other officers.
They tried the peaceful route. I get
what
that.
Was clearly inhumane
peaceful route doesn't work.
Of a citizen.
Fuck yeah.
Ken, you know, we're seeing a lot of CEOs
come
out.
That was a great response.
Business roundtable over the
that was an
weekend,
excellent fucking
CEOs
response.
And corporate leaders doing the same. What do you think companies should be doing at this point? And is there something to be done, frankly, beyond the press release?
I think there's a lot to be done beyond the press release. I think every time we have one of these situations, and you can go back almost 30 years to the Rodney King videotape, you can look at all these other issues. You can look at the Eric Garner situation in New York. There were 2 situations in Minneapolis, a guy named Philando Castile, who's, you might remember his fiance videotaped or video streamed the incident where he was shot. Another guy named Jamar Clark shot in the head. These things happen over and over again. Freddie Gray, these things happen over and over again. And when there's unrest, people put out statements. They put out platitudes. They say, this is terrible. We decry racism. We believe that we ought to build a just society. I think business has to go beyond what is required here. It has to go beyond just statements. I think, for example, we know in this country that there's a huge gap between the number of jobs that existed before the pandemic. There was something like 12 million unfilled jobs in this country, and there are 5 million inner city and other African American kids who want access to the economy. They want to be participants. They want to be citizens. They want to be consumers. What they lack is the education. They lack the training. And there are opportunities for programs like, there's a program called Year Up. I'll just use it as an example. Gerald Shervagian runs that program. And what they do is they take some of these kids and they put through a 6-month intensive training program, and then they become interns for 6 months. And then guess what? They graduate and they become productive citizens. I think businesses have to use every instrument at their disposal to reduce these barriers that existed. I heard the prior conversation about the legacy of slavery. I heard the prior conversation about reparations. The fact of the matter is there are, in fact, barriers that are faced by African Americans. Even though we don't have laws that separate people on the basis of race anymore, we still have customs. We still have beliefs. We still have policies. We have practices that lead to inequity. And I think we all know that. In good times, when the community is quiet, we can ignore it. We can go about doing what we believe is in our economic self-interest. But in the long run, what's in our enlightened economic self-interest is that for all Americans to feel to feel like they're participants in our economy. You know, I'll just say, joblessness leads to hopelessness.
Yeah, all Americans. This dude said it fucking right.
In the inner part of our country,
joblessness needs a hopelessness.
To what we have in terms of the opioid epidemic.
Yes.
Business can step up and can provide the leadership that I think our country needs.
Damn.
Ken, you know, we did talk to Bob Johnson in the last hour, and he did make reference to
everything else on the
screen of reparations. What do you think of that idea?
What's he say to this? Oh, shit.
I think the fundamental question is, do we do more than we're required to do to actually give people full access to participating in our society?
Fuck yeah. What a great answer.
Has the means to eliminate some of the barriers to full participation. We have the ability to eliminate some of the
my
God,
in our this
society.
Dude for president.
We can see those inequities and disparities in education. We can see them in employment.
Thank you.
In housing. We can see them in healthcare. We can see them in the criminal justice system. And I think fundamentally what business can do, whether you want to call it reparations or not, I think we can step up to address in today's world the continuing results of years and years of racial prejudice in this country. You know, I don't want to be autobiographical, but I'm going to step across here and make one point here.
Please.
You know, I get to sit on CNBC and have this conversation with you because of one fundamental reason, and that was when I was growing up in the inner city of Philadelphia, the social engineers in Philadelphia at the time when Dr. King was leading the protests in the 1960s, for reasons I don't yet understand, decided to take a few inner city black kids, put them on a bus, make them ride 90 minutes to different schools to get a rigorous education.
And he was
My
one of
class had 1,400 kids in it. There were 9 African-American kids.
Damn.
I know for sure that what put my life on a different trajectory was that someone intervened to give me an opportunity to close that opportunity gap. And that opportunity gap,
that shit is real.
There. We're not asking people to give everybody handouts, but we need to acknowledge that there are huge opportunity gaps that are still existing in this country. I apologize.
Fuck yes. No apology needed.
No, you do not apologize at all. Becky's got a question for you, Ken.
What you're talking about with these apprenticeships, with these internships, what does it look like?
Damn, that shit is powerful.
I think you're right. Opportunity changes everything. We've heard several people talk about this morning, including John Hope Bryant. What have you modeled at your own company? What would you like to see other companies model?
Well, I gave one example with this program that we work with. It's called Year Up. And what they do is they take these talented, motivated inner city kids, and for 6 months, they take them through a finishing school. They have to show up on time every morning. They have to dress a certain way. They have to learn certain skill sets. And after that 6 months, they graduate and they get placed into internships, entry-level jobs, We're not putting people in charge of our laboratories, obviously, but these are important jobs. And if they succeed in their 6-month internship, they get hired. There are lots of programs like this. This program focuses on kids, younger adults. There are other programs, and another issue in our society is the reentry of people who serve time, who've been incarcerated. We have lots of people like that. And the fact of the matter
and like,
is,
why'd we stop letting people get educated in prison?
To create opportunities for these people to be employed. As I said before, joblessness creates hopelessness.
Ken, you're
no, I did not see the speech killer, Mike.
One out of I don't know how many people that grew up when you did, and as you say, you were fortunate enough.
Yeah, dude, you can't get an education in prison anymore, bro.
In your situation,
they just want you to come right back, dude, because prisons are private. They need you there. You're profitable. Private for-profit prisons have got to go. That's got to go.
And at the same time, Bob said,
and the majority of healthcare needs to be government subsidized, and education needs to be made better.
I'm coming back to financial.
And the only way education gets better is by exploration. You know what I mean? And building your own infrastructure to be the best everywhere. To be putting in 5G, and if it's fucking 6G or 10G next, whatever the fuck it is. You know what I mean?
Next month or this year, maybe I'm wrong, but if we
new highways, we should have high-speed fucking trains and transportation over here. Like, what the fuck are we doing? What are we doing?
Look,
we're like letting this place like literally just wither away. We're letting our country just literally we're letting it just we're using it, and we're not repairing. It's like owning a house and just never redoing anything in your house and letting it go all the way down to where it's fucking worthless by the time you sell it 40 and 50 years later, because you didn't put a new roof on it, and you didn't put a new kitchen in it, and a new bathroom in it, and you didn't paint the outside. You let it weather, and you didn't do any landscaping. You know what I mean?
From us. So the fact of the matter is,
like, it's the same fucking thing on a larger scale. Like, we're not taking care of home.
That's why I come back to the fact that leaders
it's simple.
in the business
so simple.
community
Take care of your home.
Force. They can be a source of opportunity. They can be a source of understanding. Again, our society is more divided than it's ever been. We live in our own separate camps and enclaves.
Yeah, XD less than 3, you got yours inside. That's awesome, dude. Congrats for that, for getting it done.
And maybe sports, where people can't choose who they associate with. So we as business leaders can step up and solve many of these economic problems.
Shit's got me heated
this morning. And to your point, financial literacy is critical.
8 in the morning.
Education is critical. That is the great equalizer. We always say we're a land of opportunity, and opportunity in a knowledge economy comes through education and training.
You know, the way to do it, and I don't want to keep harping on this, but
education and training. Education and training.
C3 I'm involved with gives $500 to every high school student, and then every week there's financial literacy courses, and they have to invest it. It has to go into whatever they want to do, bonds or stocks or ETFs. And I can just, I mean, it seems like baby steps though again, Ken. And listening to Bob, I was like, you know what? We could do this for the next 50 years, and we're still not going to get to where we want to be unless you did something
absolutely
big like Bob. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to do what at least you can work with on right now. You can start this. The other thing, I don't know whether
I agree.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I do too. It's frustrating because it does seem like baby steps, and we've been doing programs like this for a while, and it's hard to make it. You know, we want progress more quickly, and obviously we needed more progress than we've gotten so far. Andy.
I agree, but I think it's important for us not to be discouraged. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Andrew. Go.
No. Ken, I just wanted to ask you, as a business leader, you know, you're talking about the things that business can do, and to some degree, this is also a political issue, and requires the political will, frankly, to create real change. And the question I would ask you is, what do you think the role of a business leader should be in the context of the politics of this? You know, companies lobby for lots of different things on behalf of their companies, and the question is whether this should be one of them, and if so,
we boat up on the river. Holy shit!
World.
Fair enough.
Well, I think, you know, business. We have
Am I right? Just buys right back in.
Organizations I think collectively business can point out, for example, that we have this 12 million unfilled jobs, and we have all these people over here who have no skills. Why don't we as a
run
society,
it up today,
including through government programs,
normally we're playing at
$3.30
right now. Now we're playing at 109 million
starting
this early in the morning.
What's happened in the last few days, and we're reacting to that now. What we have to guard against is that when the streets quiet down, when the vandalism stops, when the protests stop, when the looting stops, a lot of people are going to go back to their normal lives, and they're going to say, you know, frankly,
that's hilarious. They're throwing it back at the police. This is fucking great.
When I hear a lot of people on TV,
this is so great.
These acts of destruction and vandalism and looting, and they're right in that regard, because there are a few cynical people in the protests who are saying, let me do what's in my self-interest. Let me grab what's mine. I just think we have to ask ourselves, are they the only people in our society who simply say, let me maximize my self-interest at the expense of others or at the expense of the common good? So I think business needs to go to the seat of government, not only for its own economic self-interest in the short term, but also to think about how to create a society that's going to actually be good for business. We can't have this toxic environment.
Get out of there. Hell yeah. Be gone. You all are covered. Yeah, you got gear. You ain't chasing that motherfucker.
Thank you this morning for your insight, your candor, your vulnerability, and your sense of hope throughout all of this. And we're
like
grateful
pull a gun. Oh, his little paintball gun. Fuck your paintball gun, you little bitch.
Can I just close by saying,
dude, see, that's the
we
bullshit.
Are now facing two storms in this
that's
country,
the bullshit.
The pandemic and the civil unrest. Those storms won't be here forever. They will pass.
That's that
and then
bullshit.
The question is, are we going to rebuild this country?
Look at all this armor these dudes have. Get rid of all that.
As we have in the past. The fact of the matter is, no one of us can rebuild this country.
And look at this dude, Dustin Pepper.
News is none of
Fuck
us
that
has to
dude.
do it on our own. Together, we could actually make this the country
Why?
that stands for the ideals that have always been behind it. So thank you very much for having
me.
What
a bitch.
Hear, 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 hear. Ken Frazier, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. Becky?
It's incredibly inspiring. Let's bring another voice into this important conversation that we've been having this morning, all through the course of the morning. Wes Moore is the CEO of
what he used to be.
New York City. He also is the author of several books, including one that's called The Other Wes Moore. It's about a gentleman who grew up. He was born just 2 blocks away, a year apart from Wes. He was also named Wes Moore. Grew up in very similar circumstances, but obviously you see the Wes Moore we're talking to today. The other Wes Moore wound up in prison. So Wes has spent a lot of time kind of thinking through how and why we end up in these positions and what we need to do as a society to make sure that everyone has equal opportunity. Wes, I want to thank you for being with us this morning.
Thanks so much, Becca. Good seeing you. Thank you.
It's make it look like a
It's good to see you. Maybe you can pick up where Ken left off, just where we are right now, what we need to be doing, and how we make sure that we don't forget about this when the streets quiet back down.
Well, I think we have to consistently remember why these protests are taking place in the first place. And frankly, it's not just about what happened to Mr. Floyd. It's about the fact that Mr. Floyd and the taking of his life is part of a much larger string of incidences of violence that is taking place against the Black community. And while repeated requests and demands for action that have been made, there really has not been the level of sustainable or aggressive movement to be able to address it. And it's not just about this piece on policing. Policing is one aspect in the way that we have seen systemic racism show itself within our society. It's also everything from when you're looking at housing assets, when you're looking at poverty rates, when you're looking at COVID-19 and the fact that COVID-19 has not just impacted the Black community at double the rate, both in terms of transmission and also in terms of death rates. It's this idea that people are looking for a sense of urgency and not pacification. And so when you're watching these singular incidents that happen, like the one with Mr. Floyd, when you're watching a 40-year-old man who is put under the knee of a police officer for over 9 minutes. A man who at first is screaming that he can't breathe, and then some of his final words on this earth were him calling for his mother. A grown man calling for his mother.
That's good.
Who,
Thank you
by
for the
the
follow.
way,
I really appreciate it.
She died 2 years ago. And seeing this on camera, it's important to understand that it's not just about this incident, but about what that is doing. It's showing how short the wick is in our society and how these singular instances can cause a massive level of disruption and unearthing if we're not being serious about dealing with the core issues that people are screaming about.
So how do we deal with those core issues, Wes?
I think we have to be able to be as deliberate with dealing with the solutions as we have, as our large society is deliberate in dealing with the fact that we have so many systemic inequities. When we look at everything from employment rates, wealth rates, health disparities, etc., we can't pretend like these things have been an accident. Many of these things that we're looking at, these have been historic, these have been laws that have been passed, and we're watching the implications of it show itself every single day. We can't understand the way we look at ghettoized societies, for example, without understanding the history of redlining.
Platform to use for
and
stocks. This is
the history
TD
of
Ameritrade's
discriminatory lending policies and discriminatory housing policies, and how all these various things then line up into the level of economic and social and health disparities that we see within our society. We also, if we're talking specifically about the element of policing, we have to understand that there are heroic people who are in the uniform every single day, who are not running away from the problem, but every day, because of both their jobs and their moral responsibility, are running to problems every single day. I remember as I'm a combat
just
veteran,
started trading. That's what's
the
up.
82nd Airborne Division, and I remember in Afghanistan.
I just started buying stocks about a year ago and really started trading this year.
Anything about. I couldn't point to on a map a couple years earlier.
Virus and everything.
But I was being asked to go into communities and go into areas with my flak vest and my Kevlar and my weapon in my hand, and asking people to trust me. We have to understand that when we're talking about policing within the United States, it's not just simply about how do we get
literally
people better trained
and figuratively
it's
and
also
on the
about
stock
how are we
market.
strengthening laws of accountability. How are we making sure that when these things happen and when these incidents happen, that when people are demanding for justice, that is not just going to continue falling on a level of deaf ears from the protection of laws that are in place to not necessarily support the communities, but are more in place to support the officers. And so the way we're going to do this is to be able to have a really holistic conversation, the law enforcement community, our actual community, and to be able to pull people together to say, we understand the problem. We understand that simply nibbling around the edges is not going to get us to the solution that we need. And we have to work this out once and for all so we don't just continue having these conflagrations.
Any tips or advice? Study. Always ask questions.
Reminder of the levels of inequity.
Don't trade off emotion as much as you can. I mean, we're all fucking human.
What you're talking about is
but do your research, take your time, don't chase.
And so complex, and I think people are kind of reeling after this weekend and
all the general.
Last several months.
I would suggest studying as much as possible. The education center over here on TD Ameritrade is really good.
Right now, what you're talking about is much more complex and much
no naked puts or calls. No naked options at all.
This emotion. And if there were, let's say, two things on a national level that you would like to see done, what would be the first things that we should really focus on to try and break away at this inherent racism and this inherent inequity that's been built up in the system?
You bring up such an important point, right? Because I think that's what I think many people are searching for right now. It's this idea of, how do we return back to a sense of calm and stability and tranquility? And I think part of the answer is I think we all must understand in our own hearts and in our own actions that there will never be peace, nor calm, nor tranquility without justice. We have to understand. We have to understand that because I am all for and I stand by the calls for peace. But where is our collective pain supposed to go in the absence of justice? And so I think on the individual level, we have to be able to call this out and say the names.
Whatever happened to the world-ending pandemic? It's gone. Epstein didn't kill himself either.
In just a short period
also,
of time.
how do you feel about stocks that fluctuate around 20-30% every few months?
Right?
Are they a good source to buy and sell? Just because they fluctuate, man, you need to look a lot more into it. You need to look into the underlying asset itself. You need to treat these things as businesses
that the black community has been dealing with and continues
to deal with
every single
Magic
day.
Is real. Wow.
Itself. But we also have to understand that it is never just going to be about the policing aspect. The policing aspect has to be addressed. But we also have to understand the fact that we are talking about economic inequity and economic injustice. And when we address that issue, when we address those collections of things in concert, then we know we're actually going to move towards a greater sense of not just stability, but actually living up to the greatest ideals that this country proudly laments. I think what Black America is asking for
D-Dog to go to
is for this country to love Black America in the same way that Black America has always historically loved this country.
What is D-Dog?
Where we feel just as much a sense of ownership in its building. We feel just as much of a sense of ownership in its economic prowess. We feel just as much a sense of ownership in its cultural prowess. We feel just as much a sense of ownership and pride in this nation that we all collectively built together. And I think the thing that's now being stressed and spilled out onto the streets is we just want to make sure that everybody understands and everybody appreciates the fact that these levels of inequities just cannot continue if we are going to be a unified nation.
I think it was Ken Frazier who made the point today that these things can kind of get swept under the rug, particularly when there are good economic times. But what we're watching right now are some of the toughest economic times. And watching the economic impact of coronavirus and the lockdowns around the nation, I just wonder what you've seen in the neighborhoods that Robinhood serves right now, what kind of economic pain you're seeing and what you're hearing.
Do you ever buy bonds or options?
Who are dealing with some of the worst of this economic pain?
I don't buy bonds, but I do trade options.
The levels of impact and economic impact that coronavirus has had on our communities has been absolutely devastating. Even prior to COVID-19.
Right now, we've basically sold a share covered call.
Around over 40% of people could not afford a $400 emergency shock.
We've sold a covered option call on,
and it's a lot more than
$400. On Penn,
even prior
on
to
Delta,
COVID-19,
on
about
NRZ,
50% of New Yorkers
on Bank of
lived
America,
in poverty for at least a year
on ACB
over the past 5 years, right? I mean, over the past 4 years.
Oh, no, we sold
half
it, didn't we?
of New York,
of
New York City lived in poverty for at least a year over the past 5 years, over the past 4 years, and that was prior to COVID-19. Now, since COVID-19, there's another stat that continues to keep me up at night.
And how long do you normally hold them for? Over too long a time period.
That have lost their jobs.
It depends on what the objective is. You know what I mean?
Already living in poverty before. So, i.e., that's the working people.
And stocks, it just depends, man. It depends.
Working full
I have a long-term strategy for some things and a short-term strategy for some things. You have to every stock and play that you make has its own, playbook to it. It's its own individual trade. Every trade's its own deal.
And allow people to understand what was there already, and now completely exacerbated it. Where we're seeing the impacts, both the health impacts and the economic impacts on the communities that we serve, is not just double, but the pathway back to being able to come to a true level of economic stability and a true level of upward economic momentum has been stunted. And in many cases, what the feeling is, it's not just been stunted for a short-term basis. One of the biggest challenges we have with the impacts of COVID-19 is we're just not sure what the bottom is and what the bottom looks like. So as we're watching rising markets going alongside of rising unemployment.
So you're more of an investor.
We've got a structural problem for our communities.
I mean, I do a lot of different things, Joe. I have a rental property. I own a very small percentage of a microbrewery that's about to open up, just shy of 1%. I own 0.88 of 1% of a microbrewery that's about to open.
And we will get back to you very soon.
Some things I'm holding long term, like QQQ, P&G, Johnson & Johnson, IIPR. Those are things I just plan on holding for a really long time. I have heard of Tencent. I don't want to own anything that's China. Maybe trade it, but I don't want to own it long term.
Cross-country protests and what that unrest could mean for efforts to reopen businesses across the country. Aerial Investments President Melody Hobson is going to join us. Stay tuned. You're watching Squawk Box on CNBC.
There we go, ADMA. Let's fucking go, baby. Let's fucking go, baby. Bonds are my experience. They're super safe because they are minor profitable. Yeah. Low risk, low reward, you know. But low risk, you know. Sometimes you want low risk. Especially in a market like this, dude. We're at an all-time high with major riots breaking out in every city. Massive unemployment. You know what I mean? Cheney's at our table. Dun 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 dun. I'm okay on 10 cent. If you want tech, something like that long term, just buy the QQQ. QQQ. Just buy this. And never look back. Just keep accumulating as many shares of this as you can. Come talk to me in 10 years. Tell me how good you did. Do you normally do market trades or limit trades? It depends. It depends on what the play is, you know. Normally limit, though. Most of the time limit. I have a feeling when the market opens, the shit's going down. No worries, Joey. Ask questions anytime, dude. I like rehashing everything. It locks it in my mind. You know, educating others helps to re-educate myself.
Welcome back to Squawk Box. Welcome back to Squawk Box this morning. We've been talking all morning about this weekend's
this education center and TD Ameritrade's the shit. You can learn so much going
economic equality in this country. Coronavirus pandemic has added now another dimension, hitting communities of color harder than other groups. And joining us right now to talk about the path forward for individuals, the economy, and just about everybody is Melody Hobson. She is the president and co-CEO of Aerial Investments. And Melody, we're thrilled to have you this morning to help us.
Lemons are lucky.
What oftentimes seems so senseless. You have been
Thank you for the
outspoken
follow.
on
I
this issue
appreciate
for quite
it.
some time, especially within the business community. And I want to talk about solutions this morning, if we could. But before we even begin, what's your personal visceral reaction to everything you've seen over the past several days?
It's so hard to put into words how you feel when you're a person who walks around this country with brown skin, no matter what your economic status. You know you're Black, first and foremost, and I always feel that wherever I go. I have to say there's a despair and sadness and certainly a level of anger, and I'm horrified. I watched someone be murdered over 8.5 minutes, murdered, not die, not killed, murdered. And to watch something like that is, you never forget. It's chilling, but we've seen it over and over and over again, and that's the problem. We know all the names: Freddie Gray, Trayvon Martin, Philando Castile, Breonna Taylor. I mean, we could go on in our community.
Sorry if you hate this question, but let's say someone gave you $20K, what would you invest it into?
It could be us. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it's actually true.
I don't know. My own small business.
You know, you're on the boards of some of America's most important companies.
I don't know. The QQQ.
A large investor. What do you think?
If I just had to park it all in one place
should do. We've heard
and
a
let
lot
it
from a
sit
number
there.
of leaders this morning. A number of leaders who put out statements over the weekend. We just heard from Ken Frazier earlier. What do you think the business community should be doing?
Well, I've talked about this a lot, and Andrew, you know, I did a speech at DealBook where I said I was waiting for a corporate Kaepernick in reference to Colin Kaepernick and what he gave up for his beliefs, peacefully protesting the death of Black people in America unlawfully.
It was wild out here in the
I have to say that corporate America talk is cheap. You know, I've talked about the fact that, say, we're working on diversity in a company is unacceptable to me. Because in corporate America, we don't work on anything else. We don't work on improving our earnings. We don't work on meeting our product deadlines or for our product launch. You either do or do not. As my husband, boldly wrote about Yoda, there is no try. And if you don't get it done, you get fired. But when it comes to diversity, for whatever reason, this has been this ongoing struggle where we can't move the needle. I love this saying, math has no opinion, none. Just count. And when you count and you see at the highest levels of corporate America, all the way down the chain, the differences in the numbers and how people of color, Black and brown Americans, underrepresented minorities, do not show up in the numbers that we exist in this country, that is not acceptable. And so what must we do? Hold ourselves accountable in corporate America. Set targets like we set targets on everything else. Incentivize people. You get what you incent. Be very clear and very bold about what the expectations are. And if we do that like we do everything else, I mean, corporate America is run by all-stars. They are used to winning. If we do that like we do everything else, we would see this needle move. Because so much of this unrest, this civil unrest is tied to economic inequality. That's just a fact. And we need to move the needle on this economic inequality. The one thing I love about Ken Frazier, who's a friend and is just a stellar CEO, there's no question about it, but he counts. We read annual reports for a living at Ariel, and when you read the Merck annual report, he lays out all of their diversity numbers, all of them, in a way that I've not seen companies do. And therefore, he's very transparent, and therefore says, hold me accountable to these numbers each and every year that he puts out that annual report. That's to be applauded, and it's to be emulated.
Well, let me ask you about that, because then there's the investment community, which is, at least in the world of the markets, the community that effectively does hold managements and companies to account, and how much emphasis you really think the investment community places on this particular issue.
There's a lot of conversation about it, and certainly with the rise of ESG, there's been more conversations about these issues than ever before when you think about the G part, the governance. But I think we still have a long way to go. And we need to understand as an investment community what our power is. We have a lot of power, and we can use our power to move this needle. So first and foremost, let's start with boards of directors. We vote those proxies. If boards are not diverse, we can withhold our votes. When Jerry Brown was leaving office in California, he put in a law that ultimately he said, I know it might be struck down by court, but he said he was unhappy with the fact that 25% of companies in California, 25% in California of all places of companies had all white male boards, and he felt that that was unacceptable. And so he wanted to see those boards diversified. Well, we as investors, we hold the keys to the kingdom with those proxy votes. And we can say we will not vote for this slate if we don't see diversity. There, I celebrate Goldman Sachs in the statement that David Solomon made, where he said, we're not even bringing companies public if they don't have a diverse board. That is bold. That is, again, putting your money where your mouth is and ultimately saying, I'm going to be about the solution and moving the needle on this issue. Let's also look at the investment industry. I'm in the mutual fund business. Look at the boards of directors of mutual funds. I've been saying this is another area, enormous power that is there in terms of America's retirement money. When you look at the boards, I think the last data I saw, 28% of the boards had women on them, 4 to 5% African American. I mean, these numbers are, they tell the story of how far we have to go. And to the extent you move those boards, People on those boards start asking companies questions about leadership. Leadership ultimately becomes more diverse. That filters down through the organizations. I'm all for more interns, but I like to start at the top.
Millie, let me ask you a complicated question, and we talked to Ken a little bit about this as well. You know, there's I don't want to say there's only so much the private sector can do, but clearly over time this is a private sector issue, but also a public sector issue, and therefore a political issue. And the question right now is, if you are a leader of a company,
how does somebody have 56,000 ships already?
Become and can become politically, given the polarization of this country, and how you think leaders should approach it?
I think we're in a situation now in corporate America where the role of the CEO and the role of the corporation has changed. And while many might want to sit out these issues, they can't. They literally can't. We've now been pulled into so many issues as corporate America, from mental health issues, you have to worry about live shooters, to issues related to inequality, to issues related to obviously public health, in ways that CEOs never expected that they would have to live.
Yeah, like how the fuck are they not just getting dumped to?
It is a new day. It also is a
I don't know. I
to
think
the
so,
extent that
Marketech, but I'm not
government
sure.
cannot step up in some of these ways. And I think there
This
is
is
some
day one
disillusionment
end,
with
so I'm pretty
government,
sure
whereas
it's for
before,
today's
government was
day
leading
too.
the charge. When you look back to the 1960s, you see the Civil Rights Act and some of the
How do you
major
have
places
that
where
already?
we saw true
I've been
diversity
up all night.
and
Oh my
inclusion
god.
happen was in government, because they had to uphold the law. That's why it's no accident when you look at
Considering
television and you see all
slamming
these
cat, no,
black
go
mayors,
rest.
which I think is a true testament
Come
to
back
what
strong after a
happened and
good
what was
rest.
effective, and they're doing a great job. But I have to say
Don't
that,
tilt it all
that
off, all
corporations
hyped on
now,
caffeine after
unfortunately,
no
have
sleep.
to take on more
I
responsibility.
know what that's like.
And we've seen that everything from
Then you go to sleep and you wake up and you're like, why did I do that?
Again, are front and center and have landed on the desk of the leader.
Two other quick questions. I don't know if you saw Bob Johnson was on last hour, and he talked about reparations. Do you have a view on that?
I'm all for righting wrongs. Now, the question is, how do you do it? And I also agree with Ken Frazier. I'm not sure that there's a political appetite for something like that in America. But I believe in affirmative action. I believe in reparations. Our country was built on free
History, Mitch,
labor.
what's good?
Free. That's great math. Again, I go back to math has no opinion. If you could build a business and not pay for labor, you've got a great economic imbalance probably in your favor.
Nice,
it doesn't work, however, long term. And at some point, the chickens come home to roost.
We're back over
I
starting
don't know
stack.
how we right those wrongs financially. I'd like to right those wrongs in terms of opportunity, educational opportunity, job opportunities, again, leadership opportunities in this country. There are 300 million Americans.
I think I'll fire this with you. That's what's up.
Capable of doing great work inside of corporate
We got
America.
Grass Monkey 710 and DeChaney at the table. We're ready. We out here.
And then lastly, you have a huge influence both in Hollywood and also in Silicon Valley. And I'm curious how you think about social media in this age, because we were talking actually in the last hour about how actually in many ways, many people would have not seen so much of the terrible things and terrible images that created these protests and created this outrage, and may create a new hope actually for people in the end. But at the same time, social media has been criticized for disinformation.
I'm not sure though. I never really pay attention to that, Marketech.
Where do you think the balance comes out, or should be? What do you think that Silicon Valley leaders like Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey, what they should be publishing, what they shouldn't be publishing?
I couldn't even read my numbers.
Well, let me start off by saying I don't want to overstate any role I've had. I've never had any formal role in Silicon Valley. And I'll say this with some intention to my words. I don't know of any senior black person who really does. I don't know anyone. And you name someone for me who does, or Hispanic. What I would say is that I applaud Jack Dorsey's efforts. I think it's very courageous and very, very, very bold. It's also the right thing to do. I felt great when he took the political ads down, especially since he said, I don't want to have things that just aren't true. And I think the statements and what he's doing right now, just to make sure you check all inappropriate behavior, no matter who it comes from, that is the right way for a business to work.
I hope you're ready to
Whatever
have a
the
good one.
rules are, they should apply to everyone. That's what we as black people
market's
want.
about to tank,
That's why
though.
sports works. You know, the free throw line doesn't move if Michael Jordan's at the line versus someone else. That's what makes it fair, and that's what makes it possible for us to be great. And so when you look at what Jack Dorsey has done there, I actually think he's really made the statement that we're going to do what we say we're going to do. And I would hope that leadership is followed by others. I really expect that of them. I think these are well-intentioned people who want to do the right thing. And unfortunately, doing the right thing often puts you in a very uncomfortable situation. But that's why he gets paid the big bucks.
Melody Hobson, it's a privilege to have you on the broadcast this morning. We appreciate your candor and your insight, and thank you so very, very much.
Thank you.
You bet.
All right, coming up, I think we're going to speak to Muhammad. What to watch ahead of the opening bell on Wall Street. And we
69 big blinds and climbing, baby. 69 big blinds and climbing, baby. We flopped a set there. Flopped a set of sixes. Really scary with the flush possibility out there. Straight possibility out there.
Red again.
We take it down.
Dow's down about 18 points. It was up as
We're
much
in there.
as
Let's
50
go,
or 60.
market
It was
tech.
down
Let's go.
100 at one point. It was up 100 at one point overnight. Stay tuned. You're watching Squawk Box on CNBC.
I think, did we just call him there? Did I I re-raised the turn. I 3-bet the turn and he folded. This market's about to have a rug pull in 30 minutes. They're going to yank the rug right out from underneath this bitch. For anyone who still thinks the U.S. stock market is some sort of real or actual market, the Swede's turning green tonight ought to make it clear that 20 years of momentary madness and 12 of true zanius has turned into just another video game. Really?
Some breaking news from Gilead this morning. Meg Terrell joins us with details on the phase 3 trial of remdesivir in patients with moderate COVID-19. Meg.
Hi, Joe. Well, of course, we know that remdesivir is already cleared on an emergency use basis in the United States based on studies we already
I'm going to rock a filthy large-scale dab. I need to get a coffee on break here.
This in more moderate patients who are hospitalized with COVID-19. Previously, they reported results of more severe patients. This is a drug that is thought to work better if given earlier in the disease. They found with a 5-day course of treatment, remdesivir reduced the risk of, were 65% more likely to have clinical improvement after 11 days versus patients who were just receiving standard of care. Now, these results are a little bit confounding because they also looked at a 10-day course of treatment. They said it trended towards statistical significance, but it wasn't statistically significant. So you're seeing Gilead stock down just less than 1% in the early trading, and this is just kind of adds to that mixed picture of the data on remdesivir. Yes, it does appear to work and to help with COVID-19, but it is not that slam dunk curative treatment that people are looking for. Guys, back to you.
Okay. Thank you, Meg. Back.
Oh, yep. Thanks, Joe. Again, watching that stock down by about 1%. Let's get to CNBC headquarters. Jim Cramer is standing by, getting ready to come to you in just a few minutes. Jim, there's so much that happened over the weekend. It's hard to kind of process it. It's hard to put it together. It's hard to figure out where we go next. But I will say, listening to a lot of the business leaders and others that we've been speaking with,
what do we do, Jim?
It does give me hope that there are ways we can all pitch in and try and make sure that we take action too.
Yeah, an extraordinary morning with so many thoughtful people where I was conscious that we just learned so much. I mean, I think that we, in the history books perhaps, or lived through the 60s, but the people you have speaking can teach us all so many things. To listen to Ken Frazier and talk about how he grew up in Philadelphia, not far from me, but in an entirely different life, and how much he learned and how much better he is for it, and how smart. You know, you're just kind of struck. Melanie Hobson's just struck. These people really are still in the fight. Many of us have just kind of, like Dr. King have said, maybe we just have been along for the ride or sleepwalking, and it's a great wake-up, and we better heed it. I mean, I think that this is a giant wake-up call, and all of us have to heed it. And I really want to thank you guys for just doing real coverage that explains what we can do, as opposed to just being onlookers. So I agree with you, Beck. We all have to rethink, what can we do? You know, Joe talking about helping younger people, and Andrew asking some questions that make me feel like that perhaps I've got to do more myself, and you too. So I mean, I don't know. I got a lot of soul searching to do, and you know, you're trying to get ready for your show and thinking about stocks because that's what they come to us for. But you have to be bigger than we are.
Look at this fucking guy.
It's imperative. Wow. Great, you know, understand.
I think one of the
teaching.
Yeah, one of the lessons I took away this morning was from John Hope Bryant, who joined us right at 6 a.m. Eastern Time, talking about how when Martin Luther King came back to Atlanta after winning a massive award, and no one wanted to celebrate him for that, but it was the CEO of Coca-Cola who said, wait a second, if we don't stand up and do this, then we are nothing. We can't, we're a global community, we're a global company. We need to make sure that we are addressing and recognizing and respecting this, and that it was a turning point taken by the CEO of Coca-Cola at that point that really made that community come together and welcome him. But looking to businesses for leadership in times like this, I think too, that's one of the things I'm kind of taking out of this. So
I think
it's
follow
up on that.
I agree. I mean, when I read Tim Cook's comments,
should I put that in there? Should I add the sucks to suck, kid?
We all feel.
We'll just fucking hit him with it. Like, get fucked,
we want
bitch.
safety.
Who are you?
Dr. King stood for peaceful.
Join May 2020. Why would I even respond to this? New
But,
account,
back
no
to
post,
so what happened
3 followers. Dude, it's probably a fucking troll account. Why did I even respond
I just
to that?
think, geez, you know, I wish we had more people talking about
delete?
Yeah. Jim, thank you. We're going to be looking for you in just a few minutes, but thank you for your time and your thoughts this morning. Joe?
Okay, thanks, Becky. Join us now to talk more
about,
well, the entire 3 hours, I'm sure, because he always watches, and he's always got
undo that
things to say about, you know, not just investing, but everything else. Mohamed El-Arian joins us.
Easy peasy.
Allianz chief economic advisor, and it's a, you know, obviously, Mohamed, it's not going to be one of your typical appearances, I don't think, today. What are your thoughts on just watching what we've seen over the past week or so?
So, Joe, I would join Jim right now saying we've all got to be bigger than what we are, or Melody's very powerful statement. Look, the killing of George Floyd was horrific, and it's indicative, as you've been talking all morning, of long-standing problems of discrimination and injustice. And the peaceful protests that followed are understandable, and they highlight the anger in many segments of society. And remember, Joe, this is an issue that's being made worse by the COVID shock. Mike Spence and I characterize the shock as
negative money,
unequal opportunity.
I'm super fucking out. Just get DraftKings.
People in an unequal manner. It hits the least privileged segments of society particularly hard.
Get caught holding the
so it's really important to understand that this issue is not just social, which is very important. It's not just an issue of justice. It's also an issue of economics. Now, the other side of it, which is more regrettable, the violence and the looting, that's going to make the recovery even flatter and longer. So there's a lot of challenges, and I think Jim is absolutely right in saying every segment of society needs to step up at this point.
We are trying to also gauge what it means, Mohammed, what's happened?
Break, give me a moment. I'm going to refill on water, refill on coffee.
What it means about the pandemic, to what it means for small businesses that were already affected. There's a lot of different, there's a lot of linkage here to what was already happening in the country, and I wonder whether it makes it even more difficult.
It does. Supply resumption is difficult enough. Now that stores have to worry about whether they're going to be looted or not. Should they open? Should they expose their employees to danger? Will make the process slower. The good news is that there are policy tools. They're not with the Federal Reserve. They're with Congress and the administration. It's about more focused relief efforts to get to the segments of the population that are really suffering and are in pain. It's about better safety net so that demand insecurity doesn't hinder this recovery. And it's also about addressing productivity up front, labor retooling, retraining, infrastructure. There's lots we can do if we focus on what are the problems, what are the market failures, what are the institutional failures, and let's get on with it. And stop focusing on just boosting asset prices and focus on the real economy, on people, rather than on markets.
Boosting asset prices doesn't help for people that don't have assets. So that's always been the catch-22 there.
Look,
so
you
how
and
how do you get people assets? I mean, to be totally honest, I never thought reparations would become necessarily a mainstream idea. But listening to Robert Johnson, we've tried a lot of half measures, a lot of baby steps. Is there a way that $13 trillion could be somehow? I don't know. Did you see that segment, Mohammed?
I did.
What would that look like? And is it just not palatable at this point? We need to continue with the way we've been doing it, up to this point, which hasn't borne that much fruit, I don't think.
So I would encourage you to talk to Mark Cuban about this, to talk to Jamie Petrikoff about this. They have ideas that I think companies would voluntarily embrace of making capitalism more inclusive, giving people not just employment stake, but ownership stake. There are lots of proposals there that people are thinking out of the box, and I really encourage them. So we can do this. We have the tools to do this. We just have to focus on it. And as Jim said, we all have to be bigger. We all have to take this more seriously, because I keep on repeating, you can't be a good house if the neighborhood is challenged. We all have neighborhood responsibilities.
Can we just briefly talk, Mohammed, about whether you think this affects the overall backdrop for financial markets? That it's June 1st. Where do we go from here? Just a quick synopsis, 30 seconds.
Basically, where we go from here depends on whether the Fed and the ECB will continue to support markets and continue to decouple them from the economy. You know how uncomfortable I am about this, both as an American and as an investor. I don't like betting on moral hazard, but it really comes down to the Fed. The way they went into high yield and the fact that they now own Hertz, they now own JCPenney, both of which are in a bankruptcy, illustrates to you that the market's confident about the Fed put.
Mohammed,
they own Macy's and Hertz, really?
Final discussion of the day. We appreciate it. And Becky and Andrew, I don't know if we're going to be on camera together, but I'll see you tomorrow. It was quite a show, quite a day, quite a weekend. Make sure you join us tomorrow. Squawk on the Street is next.
Good Monday morning. Welcome to Squawk on the Street. I'm Carl Quintanilla with Jim Cramer, David Faber, live from separate locations this morning as markets and American business try to reckon with the wake-up call that this weekend of national trauma has delivered. Multiple crises in play, global health, unemployment, and racial inequality. Futures are fairly flat, as is oil. Jim, it's been a remarkable morning of commentary from lots of different companies, Facebook, Apple, BlackRock over the weekend, and then, as you said a moment ago, Ken Frazier on Squawk Box just a few moments ago. Take a listen to this.
When there's unrest, people put out statements. They put out platitudes. They say this is terrible. We decry racism. We believe that we ought to build a just society. I think business has to go beyond what is required here. Before the pandemic, there was something like 12 million unfilled jobs in this country.
They just put out a statement. A bunch of people, a bunch of companies put out a statement about this weekend.
Kids who want access to the economy. They want to be participants. They want to be citizens. They want to be consumers. What they lack is the education. They lack the training. And there are opportunities for programs like this.
Yeah, you can so
We're
right.
going to watch the markets, but
what a hero.
I mean, we're going to talk a lot about how American business, how the corporate sector tries to heal this country that's obviously broken.
Carl, you're certain. I mean, it is the corporate sector. I mean, I think it's, some of us would say, well, other than the Atlanta mayor who gave such
this
a
market's about to fucking
speech,
crash.
We're looking for leadership. Maybe we find it more in corporate, or maybe because we're on CNBC. I reminded that Ginny Rometty built her legacy on the 200,000 people in underprivileged neighborhoods, where she created low income, low opportunity neighborhoods, where she built schools, basically built programs called PTech to teach people how to be part of the new new collar economy, she called it. And it's inspirational, and yet it happens. Okay, it just happened. And then that was it. Now it's got to be furthered. I mean, I know that there's a legacy, and they've had new people. But when you listen to what Ken is saying, this has to be a national initiative. Now they're in Chicago, they're in Baltimore, they're in Newburgh. I mention only because there are very few executives who devote the time and the money that Ginny did to make sure that IBM's legacy was helping these inner city areas. And I listened to Ken Frazier from the great city of Philadelphia, who grew up not far from me, and all that he has on his mind. And I think, wow, what do I have on my mind? Well, you know, look, my job is to talk about what Merck's stock should be, but we have to be bigger than that. All of us have to be reminded of the role we can play. I mean, you and I and David, we talk about that. We don't want to be pigeonholed, but at the same time, we have a role to play that is that
no delay, baby.
That has to conclude this thing.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, guys, when you do look at corporate America in terms of the pandemic, where, again, I think there's an argument to be made that there was a lack of broad leadership nationally. A lot of corporations did take the lead and continue to in terms of their response, in terms of the protocols and practices they're putting in place to respond appropriately and effectively in their workplaces and with their workforce. But it was also interesting to listen to Mr. Frazier, Jim, when he said, you know, it's great, you can read Tim Cook's letter, you can read Larry Fink's letter, you can read on and on the letters from corporate leaders. But the question is, will they follow through? Will there be some sort of culture that is meaningful?
Whoa, what the hell? Whoa, what the hell?
So it is. This is trying to equalize where it can opportunity, and a lot of the leaders I look at are business people who I find inspirational and are doing things that do matter. But it took these events to put them front and center, as opposed to something that's at the end of the interview. It's difficult.
How about the Fed, Jim? You know, we heard from Powell last week. Pre-COVID, I mean, he made a real point of emphasizing the benefits that the roaring economy at the time was bringing to lower-income neighborhoods. He took the Fed roadshow to Alabama and areas of the Deep South where hopefully these things were beginning to bear some fruit. But then you listen to Al Arian and talk about some of the negative externalities of their participation now, the growth in money supply, the obvious areas where all those assets are going to go. It's not going to go into inner cities. It's going to go into stocks. And obviously,
that is an ATM machine.
All those businesses were non-essential businesses. Like, so many of the smaller inner city in more troubled neighborhoods,
it still sucks.
Their companies were told to close, but they didn't tell Walmart to close, and they didn't tell other large. It's not, of course, it's not Target's game that they did it. I mean, it just happened to be that was deemed essential, and we had this in New Jersey. So many small businesses were deemed non-essential, and they're the ones whose rent's coming up this weekend. They can't pay their rent, I just feel like that this became even more two societies because we really did deem certain companies to survive, and we deemed certain companies not to survive. And it happened to be a lot of the inner city neighborhoods, the companies were deemed non-essential. And it turned out to be a much more of an economic issue than we realized. Now we look at it and we say, holy cow, our governments put these companies out of business. And what did it accomplish? And it's not really clear what it accomplished. I don't think anyone, especially out of New York City and New Jersey, knows it accomplished anything but wiped out a lot of small businesses. And I think that that's the legacy of it for a lot of people. I don't know, David, I mean, when you get outside the New York, New Jersey area, there's a lot of people who say, well, why did you wipe out our stores?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a tale of two cities in so many different ways.
Bus driver changed their mind.
As you point out, Jim,
I like how he's pissed off the driver said no. It all started because frontline police aren't doing their jobs in accordance with their training.
Or lack thereof.
No, they are. Most of them are just from the military, and they're searching and destroying an enemy. That's the problem.
Why did you close down these businesses that potentially are not going to be in a position to reopen, given we never saw what other parts of the country did? It's very unfortunate where we find ourselves today. I think, guys, we can sort of all agree in terms of the pandemic and in terms of the divisiveness within our society and in the country right now. Of course, what that actually means for the stock market also adds to this conversation, because we have seen this divergence between the performance of the stock market and the economic and social unrest in the country.
Yeah, like the ethos of what happened this weekend and have happened ever since the tragedy in Minneapolis had led me to believe that there are people who want the stock market down just for the sake of reverence and for the sake of understanding the pain in the country. That's not what it does.
What are you going to steal?
You
It's a
say,
showroom
well,
car.
listen, what
There's
it does
nothing
is
to
think
steal.
forward. But the fact is, no, it isn't anything that has a heartbeat, and it's not something that has a brain. It's just a group of companies. And what are you going to tell the people who are buying Beyond Meat today? Don't you understand the problems in our country? I mean, it just never. Not only be too much of a dollar sign represented by a man, but you can't relate the stocks I have in front of me. Estee Lauder, am I supposed to say, I'm not going to buy Estee Lauder just because skincare is good, because I know the troubles in America. They don't relate. And those who want it to relate are missing what's really going on, where we're looking at companies building value. We're not looking at the government making some companies not do well. And the fact that when I look at a lot of these companies, I think, wow, their value increased. I have Ulta on tonight. Did Ulta's value increase because the smaller people who compete, say, in hairdressing, compete in makeup, they were deemed not essential, could not stay in business, while Ulta had enough of a balance sheet to do so? But it's not Mary Dillon's fault that she's conserved cash and done a good job. It's Mary Dillon's gain for all the people who work at Ulta. So I think that it's difficult to reconcile until you realize that these people are trying to build businesses and hire people.
Yep, and we've been here before, Jim, where we're trying to do both. Trying to look at corporate America's response to social unrest and unease, while trying to do what I guess you call our day jobs, and that is to monitor stocks. Your point about retailer, though, is a good one, because now the process of reopening has been delayed in a lot of cases.
What the
Courtney Reagan has more on that this morning. Good morning, Court.
Hi, good morning to you, Carl. Yeah, obviously many of these retailers were damaged and looted because of the unrest that ultimately turned violence over the weekend.
Crazy.
And it comes at a very unfortunate
That probably was
timing,
his
as many of them
mattress.
are just trying to reopen
That probably
their
was
doors
his
after
mattress.
being closed
Yeah, that is
because of the COVID-19 crisis. The Target store on Lake Street in Minneapolis is near where George Floyd was killed. That
There's a
remains
GoFundMe for
closed,
that guy.
along with
Really?
5
That's
other
crazy.
stores until further notice. The associates at closed stores will be given pay and benefits for about 2 weeks and will be able to work at other locations if they choose. And a blog post, Target CEO Brian Cornell said in part, the murder of George Floyd has unleashed the pent-up pain of years, as have the killings of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. The Grove Mall in Los Angeles also sustained significant damage and looting, including the Nordstrom store there. The department store's flagship store in Seattle also damaged. Nordstrom has closed all stores as of yesterday with the hopes of reopening as soon as possible. CEO and President Eric and Pete Nordstrom putting out a statement saying, in part, like so many of you, we have deeply been saddened and angered by the recent events in our country.
Shit is getting real. Is Donnie still getting reelected? I have no fucking idea. The sad thing is most likely, dude. What the fuck? I don't get it. Shit is too wild for me. I just don't fucking even understand it. In the fucking big blind here.
I feel we're better than that. We are all people. All of you are my family. All of you are my family. I love each and every one of you. I cry at night because I feel your pain. I feel the pain. I feel the pain of black people. I feel the pain of white people. I feel the pain of innocent cops. I feel the pain. We're all scared. Black, white, cop, doesn't matter. We're all scared. We're living in fear. We gotta stop living in fear. I am not your enemy. You are not my enemy. We have to share this land no matter what. By the end of the day, we have to share this land no matter what. I'm here for you. I'm here with you. I'm not angry at none of you. I love all of y'all. I don't care if you're 5'2". I don't care if you're a 7-footer. I don't care if you're dark skinned. I don't care if you're light skinned. I don't care if you're white. Mask or not, uniform or not. You are my family, and I love you, and I respect you. And I want to understand y'all. I want to understand all of you.
Damn.
I want to. I deeply want to understand you.
Everyone have your stop losses set? Yeah, this is gonna get ugly, isn't it?
I would love to meet your family. I would love to see the best side of everybody here. This is not the best side of
Swanson
everybody
710 said great country. It's the whole world, Swanson. It's the whole world,
You
man.
can change the whole perspective of how you view someone. Because of their size. Because of how you see them in different lights. Someone might have a bad day and you say they're a bad person. No, no, no. We all got bad days. We all got bad days. We gotta stop judging people only on our bad good days. What are you doing? What are you doing? You wanna make it
No way do they come arrest that
if
dude.
you charge you and you charge us, what is that really doing? What is that really doing?
Come on, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
Fuck you! Fuck you! What the fuck did you do?
Are you fucking kidding me?
For what? For what?
What the fuck? Freedom of speech! No! What are you doing? It's unconstitutional, right? You're speaking.
Dude, what the fuck? How do you do that?
Come on, what are you doing? What are you doing? Fuck you! Fuck you! What the fuck do you do? Are you fucking kidding me? For what? For what? Freedom of speech! No! What are you doing? This is the constitutional right. He was speaking.
What in the actual fucking fuck is going on here? That's super fucked. That's the most fucked up thing I've seen at all this. Like, what the fuck was that? Sounds bad, but at this point I think controlled violence might be the answer. I fucking agree, Swanson. Like, I'm down. Disarm the police. Make them come out and fight it out like every other fucking citizen, bro. We're all in this together. How's the guy yelling fuck you repeatedly and filling his arms not arrested there? Yeah, seriously. They take the peaceful dude and, like, don't arrest the fuck you dude. It's so crazy. I don't want to go that far, Swanson, but they need to go to jail. This is the greatest. They're like downwind. Oh my god. So fucked.
He ain't do shit. All right, huh?
Dude, this isn't my city. This is so fucked. Getting all hard. Unfortunately, it's crazy like that, dude. It's fucking crazy like that out here. All I know is I've never been happier to be Canadian. Fuck, dude. I'm happy to just be a human being on this planet, bro. We're all in this together. We're all in this together. Canadian, American, fucking European. It doesn't matter, dude. It really doesn't matter. Your country is controlled by crooked fucking morons. So is yours, dude. So is every fucking country. They all are, bro. They all are. It's all fucked, Swanson. It's all fucked. It's all a charade everywhere you go. Cue the tin foil. I don't know how the stock market could possibly go up today. Like how? No, because you let us do the dirty work and send minimal troops to handle it, but reap the benefits. Like, get out of here with that shit. Y'all are a part of that shit just as much. Like, I don't want to hear that shit. Y'all are just as much a part of this. Fuck yes, you are. Your soldiers go too. Not so wrong. Not so wrong. You get the oil too. I don't quite totally about that song, so I got a sneaky suspicion we just have different color in our jail. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's very similar, dude. Everybody wants to point the finger and say my side's pure, but your side ain't pure either. Half of Canada is KGB. The other half mafia. Shit is wild, dude. And then the third half are Drake fans. Oh my god. Can you imagine being the leader of a country looking out at pure mayhem happening on your watch and tweeting this? We need a leader. I'm not stoked on Biden, believe me. But when you're this bad, you just don't get to stay in power. I fucking agree with that, hopefully. I kind of want to buy some Merc. Just because that dude fucking... was dope. He already has, dude. It's fucking sick. So fucked, dude. National Guard has been deployed. So fucking stupid. MRK. This shit is gapping up. I want 2 shares. Oh shit. Just for shits and giggles. Reno Grinder, what's good? Using that bear. It's a bear day for sure.
And Yum China is introducing, it's very progressive here,
Somehow we're
for
up
limited time
$100,
only,
like.
a Beyond Burger at all of their stores, at KFC, at Pizza Hut, and Taco Bell. This starts June 3rd. I got to tell you, if this is a success, then this is going to be the next level that Ethan Brown's been talking about. He's the CEO. I'm sorry. What he's been saying, he was on
Such a wild fucking morning.
Recently. Here's what he said. He made the point that there's going to be a number of very big investments in the company and partnerships. And of course, there's one with Starbucks too. But at a time when there is a meat shortage, at a time when people do not trust the food
Beyond
chain,
Meat.
this is the era for Beyond Meat. So I think the idea that this stock should be up is correct. Now, there are a lot of people say it's very overvalued. This, like a number of other stocks, whether it be DraftKings, whether it be Tesla, whatever, they've really caught fire. And a lot of them about younger people. Younger people like the Robinhood cohort, which are really looking for ideas, not looking for indexing. This is a very important, very, very important rollout, because if it's successful, I think it's going to roll out all over the world.
Do they have the capacity to meet that kind of potential demand? I know it's a high-class problem.
It's a great question. Because
prefer Impossible Burger. I've had Impossible Burger. It was all right. I've never had the Beyond Meat.
As to
Figured trying one was enough.
Beef right now, because he knows that people don't trust
you know, like those
in,
frozen sleeves of patties you get that have like a sheet of paper between them, and it's like not the greatest ground beef. That's what I feel like the Impossible Burger tasted like to me. Like it was good enough to eat, you know, and it was close.
And maybe it's the time to take it to the food chain.
Raw, it looks disgusting raw, but when it gets cooked, it was all right, you know.
So Beyond Meat, and when you talk to a Corteva, when you talk to any of the seed companies, they know that look, this is everybody's opportunity when it comes to plant-based.
It's about to get nasty.
I think there are a lot of people who have had. I eat Beyond Meat all the time. It tastes fine, and I know people say, "Well, have you ever looked at the long list of chemicals?" All I know, it doesn't have any cow. Of which, if Ethan Brown would tell you, the cow's a nasty distribution of protein. But if you want the protein, you go right to plant.
Right. But it's not necessarily about health as much as it's about...
Went straight the fuck out of me.
Planetary concerns.
Impossible, not public? I don't think it is. I'm not sure, though. I'm not sure on that.
And there are people who say, listen, if we want to preserve the planet, we must eat the plant. And I'm not against that view, but my view doesn't matter. It's the younger people who really do believe in this process.
I want to see where Cresco opens here this morning.
It'll go up in this environment, believe me.
Carl, we're getting ready for a market open this morning, of course, after what was a relatively good week last week, if I recall. Of course, it's hard to keep track. One day bleeds into the next.
Are we still the younger people, Rand? What do you mean?
Like a lifetime. No, guys, it's true. Coming off two monumental months of gains, the S&P is about 10% below its all-time high. NASDAQ obviously a lot closer to its all-time high. Jim, Cash was out this morning saying the Bulls really dodged a bullet on Friday. We saw the market sort of roll over a bit going into the president's appearance in the Rose Garden. Who knew what he was going to say regarding China?
It's going to get rough today.
He says that the response was more muted than some had assumed.
Yeah, look, I listened to that speech, and it was very statesman-like. It was not how we're going to teach them a lesson. I felt that the Chinese, therefore, are going to have to come up with something that is still strong, tit for tat. I did not realize that they would use the ammo of Minneapolis as the challenge. I wonder how the president responds, knowing that the Chinese are appealing directly to the people of the United States and around the world to kind of disintermediate the president. I wonder whether he's just okay with that, or whether he feels like, wait a second, let's talk about
I'm old.
Years of
I haven't been younger people in at least a decade. I'm staying a kid forever. Fuck it.
Doesn't do that, but he's been quiet.
How is this getting bought up right now? Jesus.
So, do you think
I'm surprised we're not back down below 300.
Things we have to juggle: the trade war, the reopening, and the mitigation of the pandemic, and the civil unrest. What is the market truly pivoting around?
Well, I would have thought. I think it's about the reopening.
How is DraftKings on such fucking fire? Can somebody explain to me how DraftKings works?
I understand the protesters, and I'm sympathetic with anyone who's a peaceful.
Stock's going down. Wish I had money in my account. Yeah, for sure.
And this is the beginning of when we start seeing more economic activity. You want to see unemployment go down. And I think the only way you can have unemployment go down is to reopen, and to reopen in a way that makes it so that the jobs come back. And I look at the area that I live in Brooklyn, and that's, there's a protest on our street where my bar is. And it's kind of antithetical toward wanting to open a small business. And I imagine when I see the protest, that's all over the country.
DraftKings is like poker, but instead of cards, you use players and teams.
Because the money's going to run out soon. And we got rent.
I bought and sold a home, became allergic to everything, and put the word old in my Twitch name. I guess I'm old.
They got my deposit. I'm okay. I mean, this is the month where they come after you, and I think
DraftKings,
this is the month
took all my money. Great
So
investment.
that was what I'm still looking at. I'm totally conscious that my heart is with anyone who protests peacefully, because there seems such.
We don't lose money. Stocks only go up, dude.
To all of us, which is necessary.
Jesus.
But this was supposed to be the week that we found out how potent America really is when it comes to business. And I hope
DraftKings is on a motherfucking tear, dude.
Meanwhile, Jim, we're going to watch Amazon today. News on multiple fronts. One is that Morgan Stanley goes to 2,800. They raised their GMV estimate to 34 year-on-year. They did say that some shipments are being delayed in some select cities because of the civil unrest. And then this shelf offering, Jim, multi-part, which is sort of raising eyebrows today.
Look, I think that Amazon has. I mean, all that seems to happen is they just get stronger and stronger and stronger. Does anyone remember when this company was a bad credit? I mean, you really felt that the one thing you would never do is give them money. They were just the wildest HYG, so to speak, the one that truly cannot raise money. And the question would be, when the capital markets are shut out, I mean, 3-year plus 40. This is one of those credits. It's almost like Apple. And I think that anytime you give them more money, all it does is make them expand. This is their period. I mean, let's just face it. You see it in front of everybody's door. They've got the Amazon box. They want to keep it out there 24 hours, so it's even more visible. But it is their time, and so why not bulk up, spend more money?
Delta Airlines is not fucking around.
Yes, there are going to be some routes that are going to be not great, but oh boy, this makes you even more want to stay in your house.
Yeah, well, you point out the $4 billion number, which, of course, they shared with us the last time the company reported earnings. It's a large number. There's a lot that they need to do. There has been some unrest in some of their facilities in terms of the level of people who've gotten sick and or the company's response, Jim, as you know. And there was a period there where they were unable to fulfill requests, of course, given that every day suddenly became like Black Monday for them. But that said, they're not going to have any trouble raising capital in any form they might choose. Of course, the shelf registration, for those who are unaware, gives them the opportunity to raise debt very quickly because it's on the shelf, so they've already registered. But they haven't yet decided in what form, if any, they're going to actually take advantage of the capital market's largesse.
No, but one of the things that's incredible, I mean, I was across the street from this, in parking lot of the supermarket, and I told my wife, "You want me to go in and get the stuff?" She goes, "Oh, come on. That's not what you want to do. It's the racetrack.
Dude,
you need the
Delta
Let's just go home and order on Amazon. Is there anything you really need today?" And be like, "No." Or you could do it Target. I know that Target's been targeted. But yeah, I mean, she just said, "Listen, I said I need vitamin D." And she said, "How many days do you have of vitamin D?" I said, "I got 5 days of vitamin D." She goes, "But you go on Amazon. You know, go into a store to get vitamin D."
They have Turnings and cash stop play? Wait.
3 months ago, right in front of the supermarket. Are you kidding? But now
for
it's
poker?
like, yeah, I was almost going to go in the supermarket. I mean, like, out of my mind. So, I mean, the world has changed, and again, it just keeps changing in Amazon's favor. There's a level of a lack of safety that you feel in places that you always felt safe. That's the way it is. That's why Costco went all mad.
Yeah. I'm laughing because we're laughing, Jim, because a lot of households, I think, are having that exact conversation, the sort of game theory of how badly do you need the good to do the risk of going out versus ordering in. It's sort of where all of our heads are right now. What do you think is happening with semis today, leading the broader market lower? Some incremental news about the
I got sunburn as fuck, hot diggity dog.
Asking for support if in fact they're really going to start
Super
bringing some
sunburn.
supply chains back home, a la
ADMA
Taiwan.
tanking back down to $3.
Really unbelievable, the guts of this industry. We got incredible tax breaks, right? Every one of these companies got great tax breaks. So now they want more tax breaks in order to be able to build foundries. And they're making fortunes. And I thought this was unfortunate. I think that when we look at what they've gotten and how well they've done, and they've been leaders in the stock market, do they really need a handout from the government to build foundries? And yes, if the government decides that it's going to make Taiwan the issue, and the Chinese are going to retake Taiwan, which would really be amazing. That's not a Cold War anymore. Then maybe we would need to have foundries that was built with tremendous capital equipment that we all make here. But I thought that was greedy. I thought it was greedy that the Industry Association wants more money. This is not the time for the government to give money to industry that is incredibly lucrative and hitting the new highs. But that's kind of like that's like the opposite of Minnesota. That's not who the money should go to.
But you know, we're still trying to figure out the impact of various restrictions on Huawei. Remember, it's not just chip sales to Huawei. It's if you're a manufacturer using U.S. equipment to make your chips, you can't sell to Huawei. And then there's Taiwan Semi. You mentioned Taiwan with that plan to open that plant in Arizona.
Why is ADMA just taking a fat shit?
Not completely clear exactly how much aid is
and why is Delta Airlines and casinos
Taiwan Semi, one of their biggest customers.
What the fuck is going on?
Their two largest customers.
Taiwan Semi is the best semiconductor. They're the best in the world.
Still trying to figure that one out. How could they not get exempted from the Huawei ban? They're coming here and building a big plant in Arizona. It doesn't all add up. But you're right. There's a lot going on in that industry. Again, with the overarching theme of China versus
I don't understand.
US, at this
I just
point.
don't even
Great
understand
American
this.
companies who, when you talk to, you say, "What are you allowed to do with Huawei?" And they say, "Well, I don't know."
I certainly don't understand drafting.
I said, "No, I mean, what are they thinking?" You think in Washington, like, what's Navarro thinking? It's like, well, I don't know. He said, well, you got to find what Navarro's thinking. I mean, we have these people in Washington who they don't realize how powerful they are. They really don't understand their power. And right now, there's a lot of American companies that are trying to figure out who they can sell to.
Look at DraftKings right now, raging.
And just how about the Huawei non-military? How about the Huawei cell phone handset? So no one really has a good idea. And I think instead what happens is people just pull back the reins. And I think that's, that's just a shame. No one really knows what to do.
Well,
we need clarity from Washington.
I know. Meanwhile, Huawei, I think, Carl, has got, 2 years worth of chips already on hand to weather any potential shortfall that it might have. So they've been preparing for whatever's coming their way.
Who are you going to draft if there are no sports? I have no idea.
Yeah, and of course, relationships in Europe that you might argue are stronger than the U.S. would like. It was hard not to notice Merkel guys rebuffing the president's invite to a G7 later on this summer. So there's a lot to watch there. Jim, I want to quickly touch on travel, specifically airlines, because United's bringing some more flights transatlantic. You had Delta working with its pilots union to avoid some furloughs. And then you had Gary Kelly of Southwest saying that the fare war that we're about to witness,
Delta's getting the job done. Let's go, baby.
Clamor for passengers, and his
Let's
words
go,
is
Delta.
Brutal going into the summer.
Draft your favorite internet chess players.
People are flying again. I think they're
Delta.
flying in
To the moon, baby.
Let's say not in numbers that you would be being drawn to by lower fares. I think they're flying because people are just more confident that COVID is not as everywhere. Now, I listened to Dr. Gottlieb today. Dr. Gottlieb actually, I don't know if he meant to reassure us. He's on every morning. He's amazing. But I felt that he was saying, listen, if there are the regions that are okay, and I think that the South, where Southwest Air is really doing well relatively, it seems like they're more inclined to fly. I know that not a lot of, when I look at American Airlines,
Delta
that's
Airlines
doing well,
is
United's
doing
doing
work,
well.
baby.
The market leaders, with the exception of Gap, which was an upgrade by Matthew Boss over at JP Morgan, the market leaders are indeed the airlines. So, I mean, I think people feel emboldened. And then Carnival, which has doubled from that bottom, Royal Caribbean, you can't seem to stop that one. And yet, because they're so...
I guess
so
NASCAR's racing, isn't it?
Bottom in this group, in this airline group.
It's on TV.
He really did sell them pretty badly, you know.
He might have.
Well, they're rounding errors for him.
Yeah.
Damn, we're about to
Before we
print
get
off
to
Delta
Bob
today.
on the broader market, a couple of quick names to also hit. Cody is up about 13% this morning. You may remember towards the beginning of May, the company announced that deal with KKR, but they hadn't actually signed the definitive agreement. It is now a done deal. KKR making $1 billion investment into Cody. That's via convertible preferred shares. That's a 9% coupon. And as well, the conversion premium is 20%, $6.24. Now, remember when the deal got announced,
insanity.
Cody stock was as high as $5.20. It went straight down. You can see what it's doing there, but it went straight down after that deal and has come back a bit today. Peter Harf, the guy who runs, oversees JAB, is actually coming back. He's the chairman, but he's coming back as Cody's CEO. Remember, KKR
Moment, Chad, I'll be right back.
Majority investment in the Wella brands. Those are the professional hairdresser brands, and others for $4.3 billion. That's cash. About 12.3 times the company's adjusted EBITDA from last year of $350 million. But they've delevered, they got their balance sheet in shape, and now the question, Jim, is whether they can get their business in the right place. At the end here of all of this, JAB will still own, I think it's 50% of the company, and KKR will be the second largest investor at about 17% of, again, the businesses that are remaining.
But they didn't bring anyone in from the outside. I thought they would. Well, he's 74, Peter, and obviously they have tremendous faith in him. But I would have hoped that they could bring in some sort of rock star from Procter, from Ulta. I don't know. I mean, I fear it's more of the same.
Yeah, that may very well be the case. However, he's a pretty well-respected guy, being one of the founders of JAB. Right. Which, of course, remember, they got the Pete's Coffee. They've got so many different things going on at JAB.
They've got a lot of things going on.
$100 billion of assets.
Yeah, look, someone upgraded, I forget which firm, upgraded Keurig today. And I think Keurig's a pretty good situation. Yeah. I do think that Keurig's got a lot of moving parts, but you're right, David. I mean, that J&B is to be reckoned with. This is one, the free cash flow is always great at these places. They're always delevering, and I don't know. I mean, Cody is a spec. I just find that industry has got vicious competitors, and they don't want Cody to win.
Yeah, you're right, Jim. Evercore took it to outperform this morning. Let's get to Rick Santelli. Got a couple of big pieces of data coming up in the next 15 minutes, including PMI in just about a minute and a half. Hey, Rick.
Yes, we have market coming up. Remember, that series of data points started in 2017. A much bigger data point will be coming top of the hour. ISM.
Is this like a I feel like this is a faster.
The action has been 10s and 30s, and it's not just domestically, it's globally.
Million?
If you look at a 2-day chart of 30
How many people are in here? 172?
Is, we're up a handful of basis points today. It has been the active part of the curve. Look at a 1-month chart of 10s on top of 30s. You can see that 30s, a bigger range, shouldn't be shocking, the longer maturity. But what's fascinating is look at that same 1-month chart for 10-year boons, and you can see that it, like 30-year bonds, was pretty aggressive. It moved basically from -60 to -40. And that's because their stimulus is starting to get active. Shared debt, Corona bonds, things are really starting to get historic for the European Union. Look at what's going on with regard to their currency. Now, this is a 1 month of the euro versus the dollar. That is a wild May. Went from 108 to 111. And if you zoom it back, you can see these are 2-month plus highs going back to the 27th of March. Now those data points are hitting on market manufacturing PMI. Their May final comes in at 39.8, which mirrored their mid-month read, and that contrasts against the previous month, April's final, at 36.1 is the lowest read ever going back to 2017. So, like many data points,
dude,
the worst
DraftKings
level
is on
to be
fire
in the rearview mirror, but only by a small margin. Carl, Jim, David, back to you.
Okay, Rick, we'll see in a few moments for ISM Manufacturing. Check in with Bob Pisani on the other side of this break as the market is hanging on to just slight losses. Dow's down 52.
Can't stop, won't stop. I feel like this is like a flight that gets me into today's day 2. Like it's like the last flight of the 109. You know what I mean? I think they just added it probably. They probably weren't going to hit the guarantee and probably added one this morning. It started at 8 a.m. So I feel like it's going to run straight through. It's got to be, because like either that or it's going towards the next week, because day 2's today. Stocks only go up, chat. $14,000 in the account. Like, what the fuck? Gambling and cruise stocks straight up to the moon. I don't even understand it. And Delta Airlines. Delta Airlines not fucking around today. Delta Airlines putting in work. Yeah. Putting in work, yo. Dude, what is going on in the world? I just don't even understand it. Holy shit. Cool off, Delta Airlines. Jesus. Dude, they just keep going. They just keep going.
Yeah. Dow's down 33 points to start the morning. Let's check in with our Bob Pisani. Hey, Bob.
Hello, Carl. Happy Monday, everybody. Flattish open, but still 2-1 advancing to declining stocks. The market is really struggling to understand how all the protests over the weekend might be impacting the reopening plans, and on a broader level, might be even impacting what's going on with consumer confidence. Courtney was telling about retail here. You heard about Target, Walmart, Nike, all closing hundreds of stores or locations. Adidas is closing its U.S. stores. Amazon scaling back or adjusting delivery. You see here, modest impact here. Amazon just modestly on the upside here. Sectors, banks tend to be doing a little bit better. They were outperformers last week. Even retail a little better today. Consumer staples also up. Energy's lagging, although oil is holding in there near its recent highs. Healthcare lagging modestly as well.
This guy's some frame tour. Yeah, dude, Bob Pisani's a deadhead. He's a deadhead.
Eurozone, Japanese equities generally did pretty well.
He's a deadhead, and so is Steve Leisman is a huge deadhead.
Down the last couple days,
sometimes when they've had him on the morning and they've like asked questions where you have to write an answer on the board, when he doesn't give a fuck, he's made a steal your face.
That's affected the overall market. The one thing I can assure you this weekend that I heard a lot about
I think I posted on Facebook
more interest in investing in social justice and inclusiveness. This is what ESG is all about, folks. That's environmental, social, and governance issues. And that simply talks about impact on the environment, looks to investing in those levels, social, on relations with employees and customers and shareholders and stakeholders, and on governance issues, on leadership, on pay, on shareholder rights, and on inclusiveness. So a lot of what we were talking about over the weekend for investors fits very much in this little box.
Why is
called
everything
ESG.
I have
The
but
problem has been,
ADMA
how do
up?
you quantify something like that? How do you actually weight those things into a model? Here's one of the largest ESG funds, ETFs, that are out there. The symbol here is SUSL. This is an iShares product here. And you can see their heaviest, the largest products are largely mega cap stocks here. If you put that back up, Microsoft, Alphabet, Johnson & Johnson, Visa, Procter & Gamble, they tend to be very heavily weighted towards tech, underrepresented energy, and some industrials that have underperformed this year. Now, these funds have generally outperformed this year. That's because of the weighting on tech that has done well during the stay-at-home thing. They've done well on contingency planning, balance sheet issues.
I don't even
have
understand it
helped. So it's
myself.
hard figuring out exactly how to do this on
I
just
don't
an issue of
understand
inclusiveness.
this
ESG
market.
encompasses many issues that include aspects of social justice. So it's not easy to figure out, but I can assure you inflows are increasing in this, and there's a lot more pressure on companies to acknowledge that as an issue in investing. We'll have Mona Naqvi on, S&P's head of ESG, on ETF Edge today, 1:05 Eastern Time. It's etfedge.cnbc.com. Guys, back to you.
All right, Bob, it's a big topic. We'll see you a little bit later. Our Bob Pisani. Take another quick break here. Obviously, mild
Bank of
losses to start
America's
the morning.
doing
Dow is down just 0.4%. Travel and banks helping out as tech and industrials lag. Back in a minute.
Travel and banks, baby. Well, we've got all that. And casinos. No. Delta Y. D King Y. Oh, shit. COVID equals old news, seriously. Nice. This market's about to tank, isn't it? That was a bull trap right there this morning. We can't be going up, dude. I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to me. I should literally sell everything right now. How is ADMA? Your background is so clean and prepared to wait.
Some laggards to start the week. You
prepared
see
to wait it
Pfizer at
out.
the top there, down 7%. Barclays did cut its target, but also some names related to retail like Target, Chips, Western Dig, Deere on some of this China trade news, and Federal Express also in the red. We're back in just a moment.
So crazy. Like, how is the market thriving? Why is ADMA not joining in? Pen's getting wrecked. COVID old news. No worries. ADMA has given up on the cure. Old Wisco, all in ACB. I sold all my cannabis stocks except for I have 200 shares of Cresco. Penn National Gaming's about to get wrecked. Love all, what's going on? Hey, CBD boy. Oh, Jesus. Find some support here at 309 like it did on Friday. I mean,
let's get to Jim and stop trading.
Astounding that 3 big firms downgrade Canopy today. It's Canopy Growth.
I don't know.
This company reported a truly terrible quarter, and the aspect of it that most troubled me was that the revenues are going down, and they also had a giant impairment clause. There's a lot of people who feel that maybe Canada's slowing down. Now people are just saying no, Canopy's slowing down, and I see the desertion still has $2 billion in Canadian dollars, but wow, I mean, this is just a mass abandonment of the company that was considered to be the de facto winner because it had that relationship with Constellation Brands.
Wow. I mean, where do we say about the story overall, Jim? Is it over?
I think that there are a lot of people who are saying, you know what, there's some profitability here, but it'll never be big time. And there are other people saying, listen, without a Democrat in the White House and a Democrat in House and Senate, it'll never be big. But I do think that there's been some misunderstanding. About
RIP CGC.
It's not
RIP.
taking off the way we thought. Some of the companies.
Good thing I sold that shit.
I'm sorry.
STL fans, good morning.
No,
I have a question for you. Getting ready to switch jobs on 401k. New company does not. Should I just leave it where it is for now since market is down, or should I move it? I mean, without moving it, you could, like, without selling anything, you can move it into like a brokerage somewhere. You can have it moved somewhere in your control where you don't have to sell anything. You know what I mean?
$4 billion Canadian dollars.
Or you could just leave it.
Fizzled a lot of it away, and it's.
I don't know. I've never been through that position, STL fans. So I don't know.
Just not the demand. They
I'd
have
ask a
drinks,
professional on that one for real.
They have CBD drinks and trying to make THC drinks, yes, but I don't know. I'm going to try to get them on because it really is just astounding.
I've never been privileged enough to have a 401k.
Why, really? I mean, or is it just there's too much supply? I mean, the demand wouldn't seem to. It's not as though the demand has declined, right?
Well, that's what I want to know. Whether it's really their share is declining despite all of that capital. Because I always thought this was just a per se growth industry because it's got medical, and it's got I don't know recreational. How about that? I thought that
Jim,
one day
you mentioned you have Alta.
Oh, I've got 2 companies, Carl, that I think really have a unique situation in terms of talking about the inner city. They're both companies that are deeply committed. Mary Dill has probably got more inner city stores and putting more people to work than almost any company I know when it comes to retail. And Brian Nickel and Chipotle have long had, I'd say, the higher moral high ground when it comes to what business should be doing. I want to know what they think because this is the time where everybody has to be thinking. You know, what are we doing? Why weren't those other policemen indicted? Why, you know, other than when there's violence, why are we not just saying, you know, what are these people really telling us? And I think it's a huge wake-up call. We got to address it, all of us. Can't
Tim
walk
Cook's
away from
memo
it.
to employees.
Right.
Yeah, at this point, silence is no longer an option.
Exactly.
According to many leaders.
Well, Dr. King told
Jim,
us
we'll
it
see you
wasn't.
tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Mad Money, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Squawk on the Street. I'm Carl Quintanilla with David Faber.
They're talking about shit
coming
going
to you
down
live from
and
separate
stuff.
locations. Mike Santoli's in for Sarah Eisen. We got PMI a few moments ago, and now we're going to turn to ISM Manufacturing once again. Rick Santelli.
Yes, we're looking for our April read on construction spending. That just popped out. That's minus 2.9%, minus 2.9%. And that is the weakest level since October of 2018. And it's much less than expected, actually, better than expected. We were looking for a number that was more than double down minus 2.9. We're looking for more like minus 7%. And that follows up 0.9%.
Also getting ready to try to dabble in the markets. A little very green, where's a good place to start? A little very green, where's a good place to start? Or do you teach?
That goes back to 93.
Recommend something to watch before I get started. Yeah, I recommend going to TD Ameritrade and going through this education center. Overview, stocks, options, and learning as much as you can. Watching streams as much as you can. Asking as many questions as you can.
Isn't so bad.
TD Ameritrade for sure. If you would, and you'd let me get an affiliate referral from you, if you DM me your first and last name and your email address, I can add you to TD Ameritrade, and they'll send you an email, and it will really help the stream.
And of course, on a week, we're going to get 2 employment reports. ISM employment moved from 27.5
where it is. You can call the financial
so
institution where it is out of, and they will help you out. That's what's up.
Numbers in the rearview mirror. Of course, none of these indices are in expansion mode. Far from that 50% mark. Carl, back to you.
All right, Rick, all interesting numbers. We'll talk about them this morning. We're going to begin, though, with the civil unrest in America. Merck CEO Ken Frazier was on Squawk Box earlier this morning talking about potential solutions and how all of this has even affected him personally.
When there's unrest, people put out statements. They put out platitudes. They say this is terrible. We decry racism. We believe that we ought to build a just society. I think business has to go beyond what is required here. Before the pandemic, there was something like 12 million unfilled jobs in this country, and there are 5 million inner city and other African American kids who want access to the economy. They want to be participants. They want to be citizens. They want to be consumers. What they lack is the education. They lack the training, and there are opportunities for programs like this.
Let's bring in Jim Stewart this morning, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist with the New York Times. Jim, good morning. Thanks for the time today. It's always good to talk to you.
Yeah, sure. Good morning.
Now, Ken's point is that this is going to pass. The protests are not going to be around forever. The virus, in his words, is not going to be around forever. And what's going to matter is what these companies do in terms of action versus the memos they've been publishing over the weekend. What do they need to do?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I've been wondering, not to be overly optimistic about it, but could this be a catalyst, along with the pandemic, for somehow finally addressing some of these systemic issues? And I think there are lots of things that could be done that I would love to see done. I mean, it came as a shock to me, like a very simple level. It's a shock to me that there are so many school children in this country who do not have access to a computer. That is just astonishing to me this day and age. How much would it cost
CGC stock tanking
every public school student's home? I don't know, but to me that would be an investment worth making in education. The healthcare inequities, where minority neighborhoods have been, hit so much harder by the virus because they don't have access to healthcare. Either the kind of preventative healthcare that
Delta Airlines is not fucking around today,
or the kind of care once they
neither is Bank of America.
That can be, seems to me, we have to finally address that. That's been kicked around forever. And then making jobs available. I agree that the more people are working. I've noticed the protesters are not the ones in the essential industries. They're complaining that they're disproportionately minority, but those people, they have jobs and they're working. They're not out rioting. And I think there's a lot of lessons that we hopefully will take from this. We need some leadership in Washington, obviously.
So is this something that you think corporate America can organize without direction from the federal government?
Well, I think that, it depends. I mean, obviously, in some communities, yes, I think there are things that companies can do. But on a national level, no. No one corporation can address some of these big issues. This is where the government has to step up. They can lobby. They can pressure. I mean, it is dismaying to me that it isn't like, I am sympathetic to some of the protesters that we've been down this road so many times, and then nothing really happens. And yes, I think they can lobby.
Just wondering, is it okay to use unsettled cash?
The kinds of people who
I'm not really sure. Some places let you. Some places give you the availability to use it before it settles. Some don't.
Are fantastic public servants. But we have
If it's your first deposit on TD Ameritrade, they won't.
Mildly, with anger management issues.
Let you use it till it settles.
I don't
think that's allowed. I don't know.
Into these situations. And as long as we have them.
Again, I'm probably not the best person to ask on that one. Anyone here use E-Trade? Got it through my company stock program.
We're going to keep having these incidents. And I think that also has to systematically change. And that's going to take major leadership on the local elected level. Again, I don't think companies can do that, but they can put their weight behind it. They can step up. They can advocate. And they can push for change. And they can keep doing it even when the immediate threat goes away.
Hey, Jim, it's David. I know you as an astute fellow. So when you say we need leadership nationally in D.C., I would assume you don't necessarily think we're going to get it.
Well, we're not seeing any. I mean, I kind of, it leaves me somewhat speechless that in a crisis like this, we aren't hearing both words of calm, words of reassurance, and specific programs to address some of these serious underlying causes of all this. I mean, I never aspired to be a politician, but there are moments when I wish I was, and this is one of them, because it seems to me people are so hungry, for both reassurance and some sense of a path forward that's going to make this country a better place. And it's astonishing me that we're just not hearing it.
Jim, Mike here. I mean, obviously, the potential solutions or responses to what's going on right now, they run across so many different fronts. Obviously, criminal justice reform. You mentioned about reforming.
Stonks only go up. Just invest in stonks.
Companies talking about opportunities for jobs, and then even broader kind of fiscal support, structural fiscal support is being thrown out there. Things like reparations, coming at a moment when you might expect people in Washington to say, hey, we just threw trillions of dollars out into the economy. I just wonder what kind of political will there's going to be for very complicated long-term policy solutions that take money.
Well, I think you've got to separate, and people in Washington, I think, ought to be able to do that, separate what you rightly call the very complex systemic issues from the much simpler, more concrete things that could be done now. And you raised like the issue.
Got 125 shares of 3 Airlines Friday.
That to me,
it's probably a good purchase.
Now is not the time to be focusing on a hugely divisive issue like this. But there are things that I think can hold people together. I don't think there's any serious disagreement that some of these issues need to be addressed, and that's going to require some spending from Washington, and that it's a long-term investment in the future vitality of this country, and it's got to be done. I don't think you're going to have to look very far to find some clearly bipartisan programs that would address some of these issues.
Jim, let me turn to let me make the awkward turn to what we probably would normally discuss, and that is impact on markets. Art Cashin has a note out this morning describing the unrest and says it would be most impactful to markets if it starts to impact election polls. How do you think investors are supposed to process this, along with the China trade war and the continued process of reopening the economy?
Well, I did do. I looked back at